Welcome to the Prime Minister Parasha Midrash. We give Mikra and Midrash advice that Joseph believes the Prime Minister and the Knesset of Israel need to know so they can stop leading their people off the cliff. And also so they can stop praying for the deaths of their brothers and sisters in Joseph 3 times each weekday with the Birchat Haminim during the Amidah. And brothers, is it right to curse Joseph according to Genesis 12 and verse 3? And there's jokes about how just Judah can justify anything from the Talmud. But the issue is Joseph does not hear Talmud and will not hear Talmud. I'm trying to read into your books. I'm trying to understand you. I got a commandment 10 months ago to make friends with brother Judah. And I'm like, how? Great, master. How? So we are addressing some issues. If we're going to be friends, we got to get some things straight. And the main thing is we need to go back to the word of Elohim. So we know that Judah is a master at sending people down the chimney. And we know that Judah is a master replacing the Tanach with the Talmud. But is Judah able to justify cursing his brother Joseph from the Tanakh alone? That's what last week's parasha was about. So since last week's parasha, where Judah decided not to kill Joseph, but to sell him and take the coat, there's been some 2 million practicing Orthodox Jews who have cursed all Josephites in all the world some 18 times. Oh, is that 6 plus 6 plus 6, right? So add that together, you get 9. Is that an upside down 6, or what do we have here? Okay, so 18 curses per practicing Orthodox Jew times 2 million death prayers. That's some 36 million kosher death prayers that the prime minister's people have spoken over all of Joseph and over all other Jews who are not Orthodox Jews, conservative, Karaites, Reform. The Orthodox even cursed the majority of the Israeli electorate. Hello? Okay, how does that work, brothers? We're going to see this in this week's parasha. So a big welcome to the Talmudic Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, who recently dons tefillin, and also to the Talmudic Gevarim of the Israeli Knesset. My name is Norman Willis, and in 5777, the Orthodox Sanhedrin hijacked my computer, threatened me, that was lovely, showed me how they had been rummaging through my computer and through my personal emails in my life for who knows how long. Then they asked me to be their Gentile Christian Messiah, whom they call Mashiach ben Yosef. And 7 years ago, when you break an autistic person's frame of reference, it's not good. And so under duress, I told them the truth that yes, I wanted to look for ways we could both work together and pray together to bring the lost tribes of Joseph home according to the Tanakh. And they liked that so much that they announced that Mashiach ben Yosef had come publicly. And then it went all over the internet and all over the Christian media. And that was not what I said. So it was really interesting to, you've got someone like hacks your computer with military grade technology. It's like, we've got to stop meeting like this, but diligently seek that which is good, brothers. So I flew to Israel on my own shekel, only to be threatened with death by the secretary of the Orthodox Sanhedrin and to be bellowed at by the president because I didn't want to give up Tanakh. So this is Joseph coming home. We're in basically the first portion of Ezekiel 37. Just administrative note, we lost. We're kind of in a reorganization here, so we're going to have to do what's the most convenient. We're just we don't have any. I'm going to have to read the quotations to you and this kind of a thing. But it's really lovely when you get to Israel and in the Nasi, he's a sweet old man on the YouTube. And then when you meet him as a Josephite and you don't want to give up the Tanakh, it's like, it's a whole different deal. And I'm like, okay, so Joseph is in reformation, basically. We're in the first part of the Ezekiel 37 prophecy. You're watching bones, bones are coming up and they're getting ready, but there's nothing there. There's still nothing brings them together yet. So we're in process. That's where we're at. If you're interested in the opinion of the Ger that you chose to lead Joseph home. If anyone cares about that. Anyway, what a lovely introduction between the two houses. We're very hopeful that this Parasha series over time, perhaps, can help lead to greater understanding between the two houses. If you know enough to hijack my computer, if you know where Joseph enough to hijack my computer and ask that I be your Mashiach ben Yosef, then how come I can't get answers to emails? How come no one will talk truth with me? Silly me, because I like the Tanakh and I don't want to give up Tanakh for the Talmud. No way. And in this Parashah series, we had some outstanding questions come out. We lost funding, we lost staff. We've been here before. We're in a tight place. Elohim's going to give us a song. But if anyone wants to pray for the ministry, please pray that Yahweh will raise up his people to support his work. And that's what we want. That's what we need. So prayers, please. Thank you. But, all this stuff happens to me, and they use military grade technology on me. And it's like, and then they can't understand why I'm a little standoffish, why I don't trust them right away. Seriously. And there's a death curse out over all Joseph everywhere. John Hagee's people are under the death curse. They don't teach you about this in school, right? So when I was in school, I'm like, I don't know, 11 years old or something, and you get the Munich massacre, and then you've got, then I'm like, I forget, it doesn't matter, 10 or 11 still maybe, and then you have 1973 Yom Kippur War. It's kind of like, wow. So I've been a fan of Israel a long time and praying for Israel a long time. I've given lots of money when I didn't have money, things like this. They don't tell you about the death curse. Any of those outreach organizations, tell anybody about the death curse? Okay, well, we'll talk about the death curse in chapter 2 of the long video series when we get there. We've got some big reorganization. I'm just going to have to give you my notes of the research that we did this week. We don't have any time to illustrate. We're working on a documentary video so that Joseph can meet his beloved brother Judah, and Judah can meet Joseph, who he really is. So we will explain all that in the Prime Minister series. But it's just lovely to be treated in that way. And according to my understanding of the Mashiach ben Yosef prophecies, I haven't read it, haven't had time. Sorry about that. But according to my understanding of the Mashiach ben Yosef prophecies, if things had worked out, I would have been effectively been your king. And then now I can't even get a response to my emails. I can't get a response to my messages, the letters, nothing. It's a fine how do you do from your brother Judah. So I just pray, my prayer for this is that we can get some better dialogue, some realistic dialogue going on with someone in the house of Judah that understands that the Talmud is not an accurate representation of the Tanakh. Sure didn't get that kind of a reception in the Sanhedrin. I did get their permission to talk with the Prime Minister's office. Haven't been able to get through. But basically the message from the leadership of the Sanhedrin was that I had one of three choices. Either I could convert to specifically Orthodox Judaism, which believes the Talmud over the Tanakh. They claim the Tanakh, but it's not. It's a replacement. It's replacement theology. It's a wholesale replacement of the Tanakh. So I have been, since I got called back in 57, 59, since I got called, I have been looking for ways to come home, looking for ways the house of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh can come home. Manasseh doesn't really want to come home. It's BBC territory. So he's Protestant, but he's a BBC territory. There's a difference between Manasseh and Ephraim, just for the record. So, and I know that the prime ministers may not have time to watch the videos themselves, but I also know that the prime ministers have always consulted the rabbis. And I also know that the rabbis, especially what they call the B'nai Noach or the Noahide Karuv channels and these kinds of things, they analyze our work and they make fun of us. They accuse us of trying to start Judaism light and this kind of thing. It's not that. It's Joseph looking in it's Ephraim looking in his lazy way, his lazy, spoiled, rich kid, entitled rich kid way of looking for something easy and free to keep some easy, cheap way to keep Torah. It doesn't cost too much money, doesn't take too much of his time. So we will be working on Ephraim. Again, we're still in the very first formative stages that began in between the first and second intifadas. That's when Joseph began to arrive back on the scene. That was the we do not have time to give fancy editing anymore. We have anyway. Please pray. Yahweh's with us. He's always with us. It's a good shakedown. So basically, we had the choice. What do you want? You want to force convert to Orthodox Judaism? We're not hearing about Ephraim. We're not hearing about Joseph. So it's a forced religious conversion. It's also a forced racial conversion. It's like, oh, hey, wow, what a nice bunch of guys. Or you could become a B'nai Noach slave, and you could believe in Yeshua for a little while. I mean, you could volunteer for that program, and they'll entertain you for a little while until after this next coming war, which they call Gog and Magog, and then you're off to, and then it'll be a different deal. Because after the Sanhedrin is brought to full power, then if you haven't bought into their program already, then it's time for death. You pick one. And the Tanakh, and you say, no, I want to keep the Tanakh. And that's not an option, because when we walked off, we were keeping it was the written Torah that was why we were punished. We weren't listening to the prophets. Okay, so there were other prophecies or other writings. We didn't listen to any of the prophets. And we weren't listening to his voice, which, like I say, almost no one knows what that means anymore. But we weren't listening to his voice. We weren't listening to his voice as recorded in the written Torah of Elohim that was given to all Israel, all 12 tribes, both houses, through Moshe. So, and that's not an option. No. We're not allowed to read the written Torah for ourselves. Heaven forbid. Oh, no. 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 You poor Gentiles don't understand, you see. Gentiles? Like, what? What happened to Ephraim? Hello, and no one knows anything about it back in between the two intifadas. I came in for the second half of the second intifada. I don't know how many rabbis I talked with. I talked to government officials. I talked to other groups, settler groups. No one knew anything about Joseph. So we had some really good questions came out last week, and we're going to just have to reorganize. The rabbis, and this is for Ephraim specifically, or by all of Joseph, anyone who's interested. But the rabbis, they don't. Ephraim, it's like, how do you get his attention? It's like flying in spoons of Gerber baby food. Sometimes it's how it feels. It's kind of like you have to catch his attention with fancies and pretties. And the rabbis don't do any of that. I mean, the rabbis they don't hassle with that. So we don't have time. We don't have money. So we're on reduced staff. So I'm just going to do it the rabbinical way. I see why they do it. It's more straightforward. If they would give citations from the Tanakh, that would be very helpful, and not just citations so as to twist the message. That was quite the meeting. Oh, you want Tanakh? Oof, ow, no. But next. So basically, if Joseph wants to follow Elohim's words, he needs to die. But if Joseph wants to worship the rabbis, then he can live. He could be a B'nai Noach. Oh, where have we heard that before? But even President Trump, he's like the big champion of the Noahide laws. But like the two books, they're not even the same. I mean, in the Tanakh, you have Elohim and his prophets speaking. And then you have a bunch of stuff recorded in writings about what happened, that there's good lessons in all of that. Yeah. I mean, like, do you guys read the Torah portion, or are you just kind of like, what do you do? I mean, I don't understand. It's like, and then in the Talmud, you have all these arguments. There's talks about, we're going to see this week's portion. Again, sorry, I can't illustrate it. I just have to read it to you. Pedophilia, just basic. I've been searching for truth for a long time. So, surprise, surprise, truth was to be found in the Tanakh. And this is like kind of like Ephraim's journey, the same thing. It's like, nah, we don't think that the written Torah is really all that much. Judah wants to whip us. Judah wants to scourge us. Judah wants to throw us, Judah wants to treat us bad. He's going to scourge us. We're out of here. So we fell for Jeroboam's enticement. Yeah, bad, bad Ephraimites, bad Northern Kingdom. We took the punishment. We didn't want to turn back. Elohim sent his prophets. And we know, like, bang, it's like, okay, here we are. We know we have to turn back to Torah. A lot of Joseph, a lot of Ephraim, a lot of Ephraim. I mean, we answered to Joseph for sure. but a lot of Ephraim, they just lazy, they just spoiled, entitled rich kids. So like Rabbi Reuven, Yaron Reuven, he was saying it. It's like they're trying to create. It's about 2 years ago. I just saw it this last week. It's like they're trying to create Judaism light. It's like I argued with him. I wrote him a letter. I said, no, what you're seeing is Joseph trying to figure out what's going on. And then, but he's right, though. I was thinking about what he said. It's kind of like, yeah, they kind of are coming up. They're trying to come up with Torah light. These are the Messianic movement. So there's a big difference between Nazarene Israel and I put the Messianic movement in the monastic category. They're lazy. They don't want to come all the way back. So they don't want to clean up. They don't understand the dedication, the level of dedication that Judah shows. Most Ephraim, it's like, oh, we're busy. I've had people tell me stuff right to my face. He's like, I'd explain the whole vision, explain the whole plan. He's like, oh, man, it just sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, it's just like, and you look at Judah. I mean, we're going to take a look at some stuff in this parasha if they don't cancel us. But we're going to take a look at Judah's exploits and why Judah is the kingship tribe. And I'd like Joseph, at least Joseph is listening. I would like Joseph basically to sit up and take note. This is why Judah is the kingship tribe. Okay, we're going to see both the good and the bad. Sorry to focus on Judah, but the death curse has got to go. If we're going to be friends, the death curse, the Talmud, has got to go. We will join you on Tanach. We will never, ever, ever join you on Talmud. That's the message. And we're going to give you details for the balance here. Okay. So, I mean, what we see is that the rabbis are basically saying that we should worship them. I mean, if we had time, we'd insert a quote from Rabbi Rickman. He's like one of the senior elite rabbis, international outreach director of the Temple Institute. It'll be in the documentary. The thing is, Judah, I mean, Mr. Prime Minister, just bound tefillin. So, and that tefillin derives from the Talmud. We'll talk all about that in the documentary. And it's like there's a plan going on. Hopefully, we can get that video plugged in here somewhere. Even if we just tack it on the back, we got some reorganization issues going on. But basically, what we got going on is Judah thinks he can human traffic Joseph, and as we're going to see with Judah's insistence that Joseph is just no more. There's no such thing as a ger. Oh no, that was way back when I talked with everyone back from. What was it, 5763 through 5765. I talked with everyone who could, Ger Toshav, Ger Tzaddik, nobody's interested. No, by the way, there's a B'nai Noach over there. Yeah, if you don't want to convert, yeah, you might go over there. Joseph. And then they're hijacking my computer. They're driving me out of the old city basically they burned me out like they were going to burn down Nativia Synagogue. I mean, anyway, so when enough is enough is enough is enough is enough is enough is enough. This is insane. I've been trying to do a documentary. The commandment was make friends with brother Judah, and we do not do pedophilia in the house of Joseph. Because why? Because we focus on Tanach. So, just letting you know, your Talmud is outrageous. The main part is 2 or 3 generations and 2 big wars away. You guys are saying there's only one more big war. Is that why you don't read the Tanakh? Is because you're not supposed to find out there's actually 2 big wars? Ask your people, read your Tanakh. Read the word of Elohim, not the word of the rabbis. Good night. Why would you talk about changing gold and silver for dross? Good night. It's like I've stepped into the book of Jeremiah this last week. And that's because the Talmud basically is pedophile grooming university, so to speak. They got the PhD program, post-baccalaureate. They got everything going on. So we want to speak the truth in love. We want to be respectful. It's no fun trying to correct the kingship tribe. Nathan, I'm sure he didn't have a good time. But somehow or other, Joseph is still being cursed. Ephraim is still being cursed. So we need to get the point across somehow. And, we're out of time. We're out of whatever. We know we're going to get a song here. But basically, you might as well have Tractate Drag Queen Story Hour, because what we're going to see here in these quotations, I'm sorry, I wish we had funding for an editor, but what we're going to see is Orthodox Judah salivating over Josephite slaves and their children. And then we've got a video here. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this, or we'll just tack them on the end here. We'll try to get the URL at least put up somehow. I'm not sure how much time the editor has, but here's just some random Orthodox Jews in Mea Shearim. We'll talk about it in the documentary in more detail. They're excited because the Talmud tells them they're going to have 2,800 Gentile Josephite slaves. Because Joseph, that's the one that wants to come home. So if you want to come home and you're Joseph or you're Ephraim or Manasseh even, your options are to convert to worship of the Talmud and the rabbis, or worship of the rabbis as a slave, or death. We'll talk all about it in the documentary. Okay, and then in the Abraham Accords series, we're going to show you why everyone, I'm not cutting the drinking out because we're out of time and it takes time to edit, and this is just how it goes. So, and I don't have a pause. I need a pause. We'll get it. Trying to save time for the editor so we can give you more content. But when we get to the Abraham Accords series, we're going to show you basically all of Ephraim's problems. Basically, Ephraim really doesn't like me. Ephraim doesn't listen to me. Most of them, they're kind of still in the Manasseh category, so to speak. They're not really down. They're not really down to the ground on what the prophecies really say and what that really requires. Most of them, they're willing to go over to the friend's house and share a meal on Shabbat, and they'll rest and read. They'll do what's easy, kind of like children. They rest and read. They go to school. They're educating themselves. That's good. Someday, people need to grow up, get out there and do some work for the kingdom. We'll be talking with Ephraim about that in extensive detail in the Abraham Accords series. But Judah is the kingship tribe, so don't be surprised if you get to go first. So we have problems, brothers. You guys are not looking at us like brothers. You guys are looking at us like goyim. And your books say some nasty stuff about goyim. We'll talk about that in the documentary. But and Judah doesn't like prophets, because prophets tell them things like everyone who follows Elohim's words in the Tanach will win, and everyone who follows man's words in the Talmud is going to lose big time. So we love you. We love Judah. We need you to go back to the Tanakh. We need it. We can't come home to this trash. We'll give you details throughout this. So we know that the prime minister doesn't have time to listen to everything. He's busy. If you're the kingship, you're busy. But he does consult with the rabbis. And we know that we've been monitored. That's why I got hacked back in 57, 77. So what a fun time. Listen, brothers, get ready, because Tanakh says we are coming back home as brothers. So if we can't get the message through other ways, we're just going to have to turn up the volume until it does, because we're under the death curse. We're under the ban, brothers. You have Joseph, you have Ephraim under the ban because you don't want to go back to Tanakh. I mean, you're like, forgive me. I mean, you're like addicts with a bottle. You don't want to go back to Tanakh. You don't want to straighten out. You don't want to sober up. The drunk analogy applies more to Ephraim than Judah. I'm still working on understanding you guys. To know you is to love you. But however, the Orthodox rabbis, no, just no. You may not have Joseph's babies. You may not have our 3-year-old girls. You may not have our 8-year-old boys. I mean, forgive me. I want to be respectful, but we need to get the point across. I mean, you might as well have Talmud tractate baby rapers. So if this is the way it's going to be, and the prime minister doesn't have time, and the rabbis don't have time, then basically you leave us with the Yiftah situation. And that's not where we want to be. That's not where Joseph wants to be. So in love, in as much love as I can tell you, may Elohim himself judge between Judah and Joseph, because we are not going to the Talmud. So, I mean, just to say it, and again, I'm out of time, no time for illustrations, no time for supporting quotes, but, one, no, you may not have Gad's colors. We realized that we weren't using them. No hard feelings, but no, you may not have them. We need black and white. Those are Gad's colors. 2, no, you may not steal Joseph's coat, and you may not steal Joseph's identity. You may not tell Ephraim or Manasseh or Joseph that they're goyim and must convert by B'nai Noach, or they must force convert to Judah. Can you give us Tanach justification for that, brothers? We need justification from the Tanach. We don't listen to Talmud, okay? And number 3, you may not rape Joseph's babies. That's as nice as I can say it. Joseph utterly rejects what we're going to see in this parasha summary as Midrash as the Tamar cycle. Now, if we had time for editing, we had an intro. If we don't have time for an intro, then we would put an intro there if we had an editor. So here we go. Yahweh's going to give us a song. So last week in Parasha Vayeshev, we saw that the famous Catalan or Spanish rabbi, Moshe ben Nachman, or Nachmanides, or the Ramban, related an old saying he learned from his rabbis, and that is that the acts of the fathers are a sign or a portent for the sons. And the documentary will have a nice sign for you. And what this means is that basically whatever the patriarchs did in antiquity, that establishes spiritual patterns for the children that will recur again and again and again and again and again throughout history. And Joseph gets a witness to it. It's kind of intuitive. We came to that on our own. Might have been influenced by the general, but it just seems intuitive. It's one of those ideas that is out there, and it makes sense. And we're going to see witnesses to it that maybe Judah has never seen before. So one reason that Nachmanides or the Ramban's cycles theory works is basically we're dealing with personalities. That's not the only reason why, but certain personalities or certain spirits tend to reproduce themselves throughout history, starting with the patriarchs. So as it says in Bereshit or Genesis chapter 1 and verse 11, it says that if we have an editor, we'd have, but that's what it says. You can, and I encourage you, put the video on pause and look these up, verify everything for yourself. This is the whole point, brothers. We're trying to say we were able to break free from Esau's house because we chose to verify everything for ourselves through the Tanach. And now you say we can't use the Tanakh. I don't know. This is bad, brothers. This is really bad to hear. I've been looking for ways to bring Ephraim home according to the written Torah. And this last week is just like, oh, this is why. Oh, light bulbs are coming on. We'll talk all about it in the documentary. But Genesis 1 and verse 11 tells us that living beings tend to reproduce after their own kinds. There's good ones and bad ones within all that. But, there's the old saying, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And in this Parasha Midrash, what we're going to see is that in practice, we have 4 main players in Scripture. And these, as we'll see later, are going to represent the 4 horse spirits of Zechariah. And we'll talk about that. If you want to know the answers now, we have a Revelation series on YouTube. We're going to greatly expand it. That we're going to do, I'm not sure, 10 times more with that series, Father willing, we get time. One of those 4 main players is the patriarchs. So Esau, Ishmael, Judah, and Joseph. So you have Israel, 2 sons, 2 houses, Judah and Joseph. So we saw before we have a pattern of Judah on Joseph violence. And we're going to talk about that more in the Haftarah prophetic portion, where we talk briefly about the four horses. And again, we had a change of plans this week. And that was mostly because we were out of time, basically. We had a very long parasha last week. The rabbis sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours, no problem. If there's something to say, then say it. So that's where we're at. We had some outstanding disciple questions came up in relation to the study about Tamar in particular and Rabbi Nachman's cycles theories. And I prayed about it. And Joseph is used to doing stuff by heart. So we're working on the parasha because we understand that's what they did in the Second Temple. And the Second Temple Synagogue was more of a discussion than a one-way preaching. But they had Tanach back then too. So anyway, we want both houses to have a much better picture of who Brother Judah really is and what he wants. And what we want is for Joseph to pray in earnest for Brother Judah and not pray against him. I've had plenty of arguments with people who pray against Brother Judah, and I always oppose them. So I oppose prayers against Ephraim, Joseph. I oppose prayers against Judah. That's Genesis 12 and verse 3. And Orthodox Judah needs prayer. So parents, PG-13, parental guidance is suggested. But again, at the same time, this is scripture and this is the real world. And especially in these end times, we know, I've had rabbis tell me that it's clear that Jews and Josephites are being pushed together in the end times. So my editor requested that I not cut because it just takes time. So we have no time right now. So, but we have all sorts of sexual predators in. Joseph needs to raise his children to be aware of the dangers around them. A lot of times, Josephites can be very naive. People tend to project. So we don't wish anyone else any harm, and we tend to wish the best for Judah. That's how you know you're dealing with Ephraim. So Manasseh, he's slipped. He's slipped. He's forgotten his home in the land of Israel. He's forgotten his father's house. He's forgotten the temple. So not so Ephraim. Ephraim wants to be there. Ephraim just needs you to knock off the Talmud. We cannot come home to Talmudistan. We can only come home to Tanakhistan. When we left, it was Torahistan, written Torahistan. We were not listening. So we will not give up the written Torah. This is just speaking to the rabbis because we know you guys monitor us. I guess I could name you, but what's the point? So I have tried my best to, just like Ephraim, always, Joseph. Yeah. What is the pattern? Joseph, we'll see in the upcoming Shiurim, he preserved Judah's life. Judah did all this stuff to him, still preserves Judah's life by means of a great deliverance. Came from Elohim. That's what the whole thing was about. But you guys need to not. Basically, what we're going to see is it's not safe. It's not safe for Joseph to leave their children unattended with Orthodox rabbis. And I know that not all Jews are like this because I've met some lovely Jewish people. Still looking for rabbis. I've seen some nice rabbis, but what you're attempting to enforce is not nice. So in last week's Parasha Midrash on Vayeshev, basically we didn't have time, so we skipped over the portion where Judah cheated on his daughter-in-law Tamar. He cheated Tamar out of a husband, and that's in Bereshit or Genesis 38 in verse 11. And in love, does Judah understand how many bad snowballs, how many avalanches were set in motion here? And does Judah understand that when character flaws in us are revealed in the Torah portions, it's our job to work hard in those revealed flaw areas so that we can become better? This is the whole reason why Scripture records the sins of the forefathers, is so that we know what our vulnerabilities are. Ephraim's drunk, so don't think you're the only one. It's just, they'll get, we'll talk all about Ephraim in the Abraham Accord series, but here is we're trying to initiate some realistic dialogue with Judah, because we're not going down the chimney. Forget it. that's it's no fun, and we don't understand why you want to treat Joseph like that to start with. But even your own people are under the death curse. It's like you guys are trying to create the perfect hatred. It's like, anyway, we'll get into that some other time. But so the disciple question that came up, that was just like, wow, okay, we need to do something with this. I was going to save this for next year, but the way it came out was, okay, we need to do this now. So the question basically was, we're paraphrasing, but what does the Nachmanides cycles theory, or at least this is what I got from it. What does the Nachmanides cycles theory have to say about Tamar? We're not talking about Tamar this year. Sorry, out of time. So, and if it cycles, so if it cycles, what does the Judah and Tamar incident look like today? Because cycles recur. That's what we talked Parasha Vayeshev about. We talked about the Judah on Joseph violence cycles, but there's at least two cycles, because it's like they used to, too much to talk about, too much to unpack here. They used to talk about like the hidden church, which was like the real church, and then the surface church, which was the Asaph church. This is before the separation, before the Protestant Reformation is 5278, I think, 1517. And anyway, so you had the real, like a tiny people who were hidden inside of Asaph, who couldn't break free. Anyway, so you have this hidden and revealed thing. We'll talk all about that in the documentary. Judah has the same thing too, and it's right. It was in last week in the Parasha, and it's like so important. I thought this answers so many. Let's do this, and then we're going to try and talk about Miketz at the end, and we're going to do that because it's going to work out much better for the next. It's going to open up a lot more possibilities for Vayigash and the rest of the Parashiot concerning the attempted murder and the sale of our forefather Joseph. So we're coming back. We're not giving up the Tanach. You can we love you a lot, but you're gonna have to give that book up. We can't come home when that book is in the land. That's a bad book we're gonna see in this study. So when I prayed about it, I have to pray about everything. So, and I got, if it'll help tie together all the Parashiot series, because it's a series of stories, but it's a one big story. It's going to tie it together a lot better. And Joseph prefers to read cover to cover anyway, so we get the big picture. So we're gonna do this. We're trying to do what could have been done in the Second Temple era, because that's our model. And so here you go. We're going to zoom in. We're going to start to unpack in Bereshit, or Genesis 38 and verse 15. And this is basically where Judah commits incest with his daughter-in-law, Tamar. Okay, so now I want Joseph to understand we're talking about the kingship tribe. Kings are not really always nice people. I don't know. I don't know if King David, I don't know if I would call him a nice person. Certainly a righteous king, at least in his early years. But nice, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about nice. So, and kings always need a priesthood to keep them on track. And the problem is the rabbinical order is not doing the job. So now we need to find out why the scepter is hidden in Gad. Judah has their explanation, and we'll get to ours in the Abraham Accords series. But in verse 18, Judah trades away his signet ring and cord, and he also trades away his staff of authority that was in his hand for sex, basically, PG-13. So a signet ring and a cord and a staff, those are symbols of authority. Those are big deals. Okay, so Joseph had his Ketona Pasim before it was mutilated and taken away and then mutilated. Judah had his symbols of authority, his signet ring and cord and his staff, two we're not talking about some cheap plastic ring. We're not talking, some tin ring. We're not talking about some stick. We're, we're talking about the status symbols of Judah's authority. We're talking about the status symbols of the future kingship tribe of Israel's authority. This is a big deal. I mean, I think Judah probably knew who he was and that he was headed for greatness. Judah, that's Judah. That's Judah. That's Jews. They know who they are, and they know they're called to great things, and they've got a plan. They've got an Isaiah 30 and verse 1 plan, and they're going for it. But sorry to have to say it just this way. And again, we'll talk about Ephraim in the Abraham Accord series. But does Judah understand that they traded 2 or 3 witnesses to your authority, basically for unlawful and adulterous sex, illicit sex, without even realizing what you're doing? Okay, so now drop your Nachmanides pattern marker here. We're going to see this again and again and again. Does Judah understand what it costs him to not guard against this pattern? Ephraim's got his own problems. Ephraim's drunk. He thinks he can just meet at a friend's house, and that's Torah. Like, oh, yeah, we rested and we had some food. Yeah. Oh, and spiritual food. Yeah. We had a good time today. Wow, we really got blessed. It's like, great. Do you understand what Joseph's role is? No. Okay, well, Elohim's got something for them. We'll talk about that in the Abraham Accord series. But does Judah understand what it costs him today? Does Judah realize just how bad that is when he does not guard against that? Because basically what he's doing is he's giving himself to the loyalty to the acts of his fathers as recorded in the Talmud. And he's treating those things like legal precedents, basically to do evil. And we'll talk about how Elohim does not agree. Elohim gives his commandments. There's also a written record of what we do. That means it's kind of like, how problems run in families, right? So, if you're autistic, maybe your parents had autism or something like that, that kind of a genetic predispositions. So if living beings reproduce after their kinds and Judah isn't guarding against Tamar-like incidents, well, let's here, he says, verse 18, then he said, what pledge shall I give you for to start this relationship? So she said, your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. I don't know, we don't have time. Anyway, follow along. You can pause, and I encourage you to study. Joseph likes to study. I know Judah did, like the thought of highlighter on a Bible. It's just like, Judah can't handle that. Joseph does that. We don't mess with scrolls, but Bibles, we mark those up. So people want to stop and check it. I encourage you to check it. Don't just believe it because I say it. Believe it because your scriptures give witness to it. It says, then he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. And then she gives birth to Peretz and Zerah. And those names, of course, are always prophetic. So Peretz goes on to lead King David's line. And Peretz means breaking through. So that's one reason why Judah is the kingship tribe, is Judah basically takes the initiative in a lot of areas. And Joseph would really do well to pay attention to some of the things that Judah does. It'd be better, if I may make a respectful comment, it'd be much better if we could trust everything that Judah said. That'd be really great, because this Talmudic agenda is not going to work for Joseph, and we'll show you why. Okay, I mean, when I came over there in the second half of the Second Intifada, I was just really expecting to be blown away with knowledge from the rabbis. Back then, I didn't know what was going on. Mr. Autism didn't know what was going on. So I was trying to connect. I have difficulty connecting with people anyway. That's what autism is. So you spend your time with Elohim. So, but basically, I wanted to come learn, but they wouldn't let you in the yeshiva unless you gave up Yeshua, because either way, you're going to they want you to convert to Orthodox Judaism, or you become a B'nai Noach slave. Not even B'nai Noach slaves are allowed to keep Yeshua. And this is like, now that I understand what was going on, I see things a whole lot more clearly. And There are some things that go on. The worship of Saturn, we'll document in the documentary some of the things that the Frankists do. And I want to be clear: the Frankists are really a very small minority in Israel. It's the and there's many Jews. We'll talk about this. There's many Jews that reject the Frankists. We're talking about the Chabad, basically, and I'm sure there's others. Uh, and there's closet Chabad and these kinds of things. So, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to have a constructive purpose. What we're trying to do is we're trying to have a family reunion on the basis of Tanach, because that's the document that the prophecies over Joseph's return as tribes exist. As we saw last week, it talks about the return of Joseph as tribes. And it becomes a real concern to us that Judah does not seem to be. I'm not sure if you're aware. I don't know if you touch on this. I need to, this week, I need to research this more, see what kind of rabbinical literature there is on this. But what it seems like is, anyway, uh, Judah is taking slips as a legal precedent rather than taking them as warnings about how to walk correctly. So it's anyway, incest, zera meaning seed. So you're creating seed line. You got two different seed lines. You got anyway. We're going to see it's highly significant that there are zera or seed, and we're going to see it's highly significant that this takes place in the context of adulterous and incestuous relationships. And if we had more time, we could talk about the last 350 years or so, or even earlier, the last 350 years or so, maybe even early, basically starting with Isaac Luria or the Ari and his Lurianic Kabbalah, which to us seems like, yeah, I mean, I believe the premise, this could be, don't quote me on this, but I believe the premise is that Lurianic Kabbalah is a successful adaptation of the Chaldean or the Babylonian Kabbalah version, which is bad to the bone. So you've got this Lurianic Kabbalah, and which is supposedly a successful adaptation, except it says stuff that not in Tanakh. So to us, to Joseph, it just seems like adding. And there's all these warnings against adding and taking away. And it's kind of like, well, you added the Talmud and you've taken away the Tanakh. And that's kind of like it all snapped into focus this last few weeks. We began researching the Talmud for the documentary. So after the Ari, then you had Shabtai Zevi and Jacob Frank. And we're hoping to include that information in the series for the prime minister. But basically, so major cutbacks here. We also need to feed disciples. And that's what I live for, is these good studies, learning more about the Tanakh. So, and then when we see the Talmud conflicting with the Tanakh, it's like, no. And then the way it conflicts with the Tanakh, it's like, oh no, thing is horrible. So anyway, we also have to feed disciples. So if you want to know more, if you want to know more about the unlawful and illicit or lurid, lurianic bodily fluid goings on of the house of Judah, PG-13, and if you want to know how the Tamar patterns of Genesis 38 play out today, then the best book I know of is written by a secular Iraqi Jew named Robert Sepper. And I don't think the editor has time to splice this in. I'll just hold it up here. You can get it on Amazon. Hopefully we can get a good image. Maybe he's got time. I don't know if we do. But anyway, Robert Sepper, we're going to give you a nice scan and all that. 1666, there's a year for you. A redemption through sin. And this is the story of how half of Orthodox Judaism went into Shabtai Zevi's or Saturn Zevi's work. Anyway, so it's okay. So 1666, redemption through sin. And so half of Orthodox Judaism goes into this. There's this teaching that you can be redeemed through acts of sin, kind of like Tamar. So if you can see the pattern marker showing up again. So, and, I mean, because Tamar, she certainly thought that the way to be redeemed was through sin. right? So, I mean, here she is. Judah cheats her out of a proper husband, and it's okay, Judah. So, and it's like, do people think that there's no cost to these things? Like this is like a legal precedent, and now we can do what we want, or like, well, what is or maybe not aware of it? I'm not sure. So whoever it is that's this assigned to monitor Mashiach ben Yosef from 5777, in which directions is, I've seen some of the reports show up. So, I know what you guys are doing. I can't see you, but it's kind of like a deer walks through the snow. You can see the tracks. So, hello. Anyway, craziness. This is like, this is going to take a while, brothers, but please go back to the Tanakh. We can't come home to Talmud. So we have all this stuff gets launched in in Vayeshev, just like kaboom. It's like everything. And of course, that's from the dreams, right? That dreamer Joseph, he's dreaming that he should be keeping the Tanakh instead of Talmud. Okay, well, now you have this illicit relationship, drop a Nachmanides marker, and then now you have two lines of offspring from that union, one of which is the kingship line. And there's this other line that says something to do with seed. What could that mean, brothers? So, with all love and all respect due to the kingship tribe, brother Judah, Joseph's take why we can't come home. So I'm just trying to communicate. I'm autistic. We're not great at communication. We see a lot of stuff. I have a tough time communicating it. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best job at communicating here. We're a little abrupt. We have a reputation for being abrasive or direct or this kind of a thing. It's like, what else are you going to do but talk about the real stuff? I don't know. Okay, so anyway, we see this as kind of an Amos 2 in verse 4 moment. So you have in verse 4, you have Amos 2 in verse 4, it says, thus says Yahweh, for 3 transgressions of Judah and for 4. I hate to be schooling Judah. This is not what I want to be doing. I want to be sitting at someone's feet learning about Tanakh, but you guys don't know about Tanakh. So we have to school you on Tanakh. It's like, who would have thought it? Who would have thunk it? For 3 transgressions of Judah and for 4, Ephraim will get his. I will not turn away. Manasseh condemns himself. I will not turn away its punishment because they have despised the Torah of Yahweh and have not kept his commandments. And Esau's a whole different category. It says their lies lead them astray. What could that mean? And these are lies which their forefathers followed. What could that mean? Within the lies, lies from Parasha Vayeshev, lies from the Tamar cycle. Are these the lies that lead them astray? Lies which their forefathers followed as recorded. Drop your Ramban cycle marker here. Okay, and we've got the kingship tribe who, maybe, or I think he does know his own strength. He just doesn't know the Tanakh. Like as we saw last week, you can be this elite rabbi with your own ministry. You haven't even read the Tanakh once. I'm like, are you serious? Is that standard, or like what? If somebody knows, if you could please leave in the comments, is like, is that classic? Like you just don't need the Tanakh? Again, this is why they call it. It's like a throwaway document with Judah. It's like it's like the Magna Carta. It's like the Constitution. It's like, okay, it was cool in its day. Now it's passé. It's like done. Next. Mashiach ben Yosef. Next. And now you guys are getting ready to take control of the world, right? Because why? Okay, so why is because Judah spends his time and his money building a kingdom for his coming anti-Yeshua king, his coming anti-Yeshua Messiah. So one thing you can absolutely say about Judah is not slack. Judah is active. It's like Joseph could wake up and take note. Ephraim, mostly, because if he responds, he's Ephraim. If he doesn't respond, he's Manasseh. That's how it goes. So the only problem is he ignored Judah. Why do you ignore it? Like, so they want to know, and then they do not want to hear about Daniel 9 and verse 25 and 26. They just do not want to hear about it. They don't hear about arguments from the Tanakh even. If it doesn't match what is in the Talmud, because the mythology goes, the Talmud is the only possible correct interpretation of the Tanakh. There's no other. It's all kind of bullet holes and It's like holier than Swiss cheese, right? I mean, it's just like, yeesh. They take this context, this or that quote out of context, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. They write a whole tractate on it. I'm like, you took it out of context. Why? Because they don't even read the Tanakh. It's like it's done. It's like you're going to be a Supreme Court justice. You don't even read the whole Constitution. You could be like, don't even read they don't even know the Tanakh. It's like, oh, it's so hard reading the Tanakh. Oh, what a bunch of guys. You guys are a bunch of work. We have to protect our children. We have to keep our children away from you. Okay, so, and, we are not willing to give up the Tanakh. We'll take a look in other places. Daniel 9 and verse 25 and 26. Yeshua is the only man who can ever fulfill that. He's the only guy, right? Because, why? Because Mashiach Nagid has to come in the second temple period, right? He has to come before, verse 9 and 26. He has to come before the destruction. And that was Titus. Even you guys agree. Well, no, you guys don't agree about much. But you have this like Cyrus. Like, are you serious? Like Cyrus, okay, great, fine. We'll try Cyrus. Count 483 years. Who came? Who showed up? Daniel 9:25. Who showed up? And say, oh, well, Cyrus fulfilled the role of Mashiach Nagid. Like, what? He gave the decree, and that counts as fulfilling the prophecy 483 years later? Who came? Who is Mashiach Nagid? Who came? Don't bring that up when you're face to face with the Sanhedrin. That doesn't work. Again, the nice old man on the YouTube, but when you see him, he doesn't want to hear about Daniel. He doesn't care. It's like Daniel 9:26 right there. The only valid interpretation of the Tanakh possible, right? And like, okay, so who came? Who came before the destruction of the Second Temple? Who came? La, 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 la. Get out of here, Goy. Next. Bye. We'll stay in the dispersion. You need us to come home more than we need to come home. And you guys don't think so. And we understand you got Skynet and all this stuff, right? I experienced probably U.S. technology too. Anyway, the thing for Joseph to note is that Judah at least we're talking about bands and beauty, I think. I'd have to look up Zechariah. Did you guys read that one? So you have bands or bonds. I'd have to look the word up. And then you have beauty, which is Ephraim. You have the beauty boys, the beauty queens. It's like they can't be bothered to get their hands dirty. Why? Because dad was rich. Dad was Joseph. So they don't have to work. They're entitled. It's like, never mind. Even the Philistines have a state because they organize and they work toward their goal. How did Judah get a state? Judah worked for it. Even the Philistines got a state. We can't necessarily agree with the tactics. We can't necessarily agree with all the goals, but the point is, Judah shows discipline. Judah works together. It's implied by the commandments in the Tanakh. We're implied to work together as a family team. So because Judah works together as a nation, they have a country. Even Ishmael has a country. But Joseph, he can't be bothered, right? Because it costs time and money, right? Like discipleship. Yeah, that's really tough. No, take time, take money. So, your Bible, you get what you pay for, right? So anyway, we'll talk all about Ephraim. There's a few gems, there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, you're dealing with Manasseh. Like Rabbi Reuven's comment, they want to create Judaism light. They think they're Ephraim. They're not Ephraim. They're not kicking in, not yet. We're still in the early phases. We'll get there. Give it time. Ask again in 7 years. We'll get there. So again, we're picking on Judah, but only because you're cursing us. You pray 3 times. You pray 18 times a week. 936 times a year, you pray for our death or enslavement. And now we're starting to study into the Talmud. It's like, now we find out there's no nicer way to say it. You want to rape our babies. And here's Joseph trying to help Judah. Here's the battle axe and weapons of war, in support of Judah. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Right? Make the best of it. What are you going to do? Okay, well, to obey the written Torah, which according to you, I'm not supposed to read, Vayikra or Leviticus 19 and verse 17 commands us not to hate our brother in our heart, even if he wants to kill us and enslave us and rape our babies, as recorded in the Talmud. Okay, he says, no, rather it says, you shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. Well, if you did it the biblical way, YouTube would cancel you for sure. So I'm autistic. I'm just, this is my reaction to what I'm reading and seeing and studying. So I got called in 57, 59, and it's been continuous study ever since, trying to help bring Ephraim home. And you guys know that, or you wouldn't have hacked my machine, hijacked my life. That's what you did. We can stay out. we can hold out. We're not coming home to Talmud. We are not letting you touch our children. It is, I'm being as nice as I can. It is anger and shame that Judah would even consider such monstrous things. And we see them as an outgrowth of an unchecked, in fact, almost deified Tamar cycle. You got Judah on Joseph violence. You got Judah on Tamar. What's the right word? Brothers. Again, Ephraim has different problems. Ephraim's entitled. Ephraim doesn't want to apply himself. Ephraim doesn't want to commit. Ephraim doesn't want to do this. Ephraim doesn't want to do that. Isaiah, Yeshayahu 10 and verse 22 says that although the children of Israel, or meaning Ephraim, and Manasseh doesn't, Manasseh excludes himself, but although the children of Israel are as numerous as the sand of the sea, it's like, maybe your average Ephraimite watching this broadcast could do some math and see how it applies to him or her. And are you doing actually everything that says to do in the Tanach, if that's what we're supposed to do? If that's what Yeshua said in his very first sermon. So we have to out Torah the rabbis. I had no idea how easy that would be, actually, but they have some outstanding structure. And we can learn a lot of things from them. So don't hate them, but we need to rebuke them. So Ephraim's got his own problems. I'll have to deal with him in the next video. We have to start with the kingship tribe because you guys set the tone. And if you guys don't change, you're going to kill a lot of people. It's going to be blood guilt. It's going to be very, very, very bad. Very bad. So as your people, O Israel or Ephraim, be as the sand of the sea, yet only a remnant of them will be worth bringing home. Look it up in your own Bibles. And Ephraim can't be bothered. He's just resting and reading on Shabbat and feasts. He's like a professional college student or whatever. Don't ask him to do any actual work. Don't ask him to actually do whatever it says in the Tanakh, like Yeshua said to do. And we'll talk about this in the series for the documentary for the prime minister. There's your basic divide. When you find Christians, Josephite Christians, Ephraimite Christians, who want to obey the Tanakh, that's the ones you want. Those ones are safe. They will never break Genesis 12 and verse 3, unlike the rabbis. So, and then the rest, I can't vouch. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't vouch for the others. If they don't want to obey the full Tanakh, if they don't want to obey the full Brit Chadasha, we will not. We can't. Anyway, that's all for the Abraham Accords series. Joseph's problem isn't replacing the Tanakh. Joseph's problem is he's just very slack and very selfish about how he does it. Entitled rich kid, thinks he doesn't really need to work. If it's not easy, he doesn't want it. Again, I think I told you, like I'm explaining this whole vision, and the guy's wife is like coming out of her chair. The guy's like, oh, this sounds like a lot of work. And he's one of the better ones. So anyway, we'll talk about in the Abraham Accord series. Check us again in 7 years. So, but with regard to the Tamar cycles, Judah has a different set of problems than Ephraim. So I'm not going to sit here and dish on Judah and not dish on Ephraim. Ephraim's got his turn is next. We need to start with Judah. Judah's problem is not that he's lazy, entitled, and indifferent like Ephraim. That's not Judah's problem. Judah is amazing. Judah works hard. He's smart. He's careful about his choices. He thinks things through. He thinks every step through almost. And he has discipline that is just way beyond Joseph. Joseph is like, again, I think Angus Wooten, may he rest in peace. I think he used to talk about, herding cats. It's like, as long as you're feeding them, here they come. You stop feeding them, there they go. So it's Judah's very different than that. Judah has no shortage of talent, that's for sure. And it's clear, at least to me, why Elohim would choose Judah to be the kingship tribe. So if you think about it, we'll talk about this in the chronology of the documentary. What you have is the combined kingship tribe, and you have the Levitical tribe, and you combine all that in one in-house. Now you get a lot of horsepower under the hood. And I think the only problem, if I may say so, as a brother who, son of the same four mothers, because we're all mixed back and forth, I think the problem is that, does Judah remember who gave him his role? So you're sure that Elohim gave you the eternal Torah, but it's like you can't wait to rewrite it. You can't wait to replace it with your own works. And say that this is the only valid interpretation, but it's like two completely different books, two completely different genre. It's just. Anyway, last week we saw you can't wait to steal Joseph's Ketona Basim and his identity. So forgive me, I unenrolled from my PhD program in favor of seeking the Spirit directly. So I'm not qualified as a PhD psychologist to use the phrase corporate narcissism. And corporate narcissism isn't a biblical phrase, so we won't call it that. I think a biblical phrase would be more like hypocrisy. And replacing Elohim's book with anything else is a real problem, brothers. There's only a few prohibitions in the Tanach that are direct, but it's implied everywhere. Don't change my words. Why did you think it would be okay? Why did Levitical, or why did you think it would be okay? You're a tribe of Levites. You were chosen because you're supposed to be teaching and enforcing Yahweh's word. That's what your job is. That's what the Levitical order is supposed to do. Is that what you're doing? I don't think so. It's more you're replacing Elohim's word, and it's what you're replacing Elohim's word with that matches the Tamar cycle so well. Judah on Tamar. It's nasty. So, it's true you have a kingship tribe. It's true you have a Levitical priesthood tribe. It's not a rabbinical. That's not the call. So, you do have the kings and the priests. So you have a house, basically, and Benjamin gets thrown in there. Why would you think you get to make up your own rules? Why would you think that's okay? When you give your children rules for your house, do you expect them to obey you? So when Elohim gives us rules at Mount Sinai and says, don't change them ever, two clear witnesses to that. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Okay, so it was an outstanding question about the Tamar cycle, and so I thought, I tried to look up the Christian authors, and they just didn't know that much. So I thought, we need to look up the Jewish authors, and they have a whole bunch on this. So basically, the shortest way we can answer this question without starting a whole new series, which we don't want to do right now, is basically to recommend the Robert Sever book and then do part of this midrash on it, because it really, I learned most of this stuff somewhere else, but this little book ties it all together seamlessly. You can look it up anyway. Great little book. So on the back cover, it says, in 1666, now, again, there's a year for you, a Jewish man by the name of Sabbatai, or Saturn, and so we'll talk later. Saturn is an interesting relationship. We'll have to study into it later. It is both, at the same time, It is both Judah's planet and Satan's planet, all at the same time. So Sabbatai, meaning in 1666, excuse me, Saturn Zevi declared himself to be the Messiah. Oh my. Okay, so and again, we'll talk about Daniel 9 and verse 26 in the documentary study that we're coming up with for the Prime Minister and for the Knesset. Um, but Daniel 9 and verse 26, Mashiach Nagid, Mashiach the Prince, Mashiach the Teller, the Director, Nagid, Tell, Tagid. What's Nagid? Messiah the Teller, Messiah the Director, Messiah the Prince, one like Moses. He's supposed to come before the second temple was destroyed. He's also he fulfilled, is it Micah 5:2 at the same time? Don't quote me on that one, but I think that's what it is. Messiah the Director, Messiah the Prince had to be cut off before the second temple was destroyed. So why are we looking for Mashiach after that? What sense does that make? You defined it into the role of the Mashiach. You say the prime minister fulfills the role of Mashiach. It's like, come, you guys are too cool for shul. So he continues on the cover. He says, followers, put up a graphic if we had more time, but or more staff. Followers of this heretical cult believe that sin is holy and should be practiced for its own sake. Woof. Ay. And Jacob Frank's followers believe the same thing. Jacob Frank's followers believe the same thing. Okay, and later we'll see that the Chabad descends basically from the religion of Jacob Frank. So this, the Rothschild family gave Frank his fund. I'm not sure if he funded Shabtai Zevi. I think so, but don't quote me on that. I believe he did fund Jacob Frank. So we'll see. We'll talk about the lines of Zerah. Anyway, so again, for Christians, for Nazarene, for Ephraim, for Joseph, for Manasseh, Manasseh especially needs to pay attention to this. This situation does not describe most Jews. Okay, the thing is, we're talking about the power elite here. We're talking about the power less than 1% of Judaism, basically. For Joseph, for Ephraim, I think the thing to remember, the thing to keep in mind is that we see the same kinds of things go on in the Vatican. So, you have things that go on inside the Vatican kept hush, Mormon church. There's all kinds of rumors about what used to happen in the basement of the Mormon church. A lot of Catholic churches, some graveyards found in them. It's not pretty. So basically what we're seeing here is Babylon. And Babylon, we'll talk more about Mystery Babylon in the Abraham Accords series. So that's the place to wrap that in. But what you're talking about basically in Babylon is confusion and division and replacement, effectively. That's Mystery Babylon, this replacement of Elohim's word, something else that appears to be, it's like the churches, church system. For one, Asaph, that's absolutely Babylon. And then you've got a lot of Joseph that's still kind of stuck in the Manasseh phase. They haven't come out yet. We'll talk all about that. But basically you have most of the people that go to the churches like that, they have no idea what goes on because they don't really pay attention. They don't really care, right? It's not important to them. We're back into Joseph's children category. Grew up rich, privileged, entitled. Don't think we have to work and stuff. Don't have to put it in first place. So Judah, anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. So just for Joseph. So Orthodox Jews are, depending on whose numbers you use and how they count, Orthodox Jews are basically between 10 and 13% of Judaism. So they love number 13. And so the Chabad is about 10 to 13% of that. So the Chabad is about 10 to 13% of all Orthodox, a little more than 1 in 10. But so basically, and not all Chabad are rich. Some are very poor, and some Jews do very well. A lot of business people, and they tithe, and that's one reason they hold together. They stick together like bonds, I believe. Bands or bonds. I have to look up the verse. But the thing is, not all Jews accept the Chabad. We'll talk about this more, and they go undercover. So when you're looking at government agents and stuff, they go undercover. And not all Jews accept or like the Chabad, at least the surface version. But then when you're dealing with people who are gone undercover, they got lines of zero and this kind of a thing, or they just develop loyalties or whatever. I mean, Mendel's peas. Many Orthodox Jews reject the Chabad, and as we'll see, with good reasons. But the Chabad nonetheless has enormous political power in Judah. And again, at least partly because the owners of the Levant are also Frankists. And I check my facts in the book, but we knew that they funded, I used to say, the Sabbatean Frankists, because those are actually two different groups. So the Sabbateans, those went into, we'll talk about the Dunmay in some other place. And then the Frankists, they became the Jesuit order. So, but again, the thing I would like to point out to Joseph is, what do you want from the kingship tribe, right? So there's two halves here. You guys talk about positive and negative, establishing the extremes, so now you can make a correct judgment or whatever. So if you have a king, right? So if you have a king, and we derive stuff straight from the Tanach, so we don't do Talmud except to take a look and realize why we don't want to. Good night. So anyway, Judah is the kingship tribe. So as Judah understands it, I want to be fair. I want to be accurate. I think Judah would agree that he feels some kind of especially since Isaac Luria or the Ari, there has been some kind of a feeling that because of Lurianic Kabbalah, he's allowed now to take the initiative. He's allowed to establish a kingdom basically throughout all the world, or to lay the groundwork for establishing a kingdom throughout the world. And basically, Frankist Judah has not been slack. They have taken the initiative in ways that Ephraim, well, I'm not that we need to take note, but just basically, I don't know what to be in awe of. I guess you guys are really amazing at what you do. And I know that a lot of it, the way it's manifests specifically, is a function of Kabbalism, and specifically Lurianic Kabbalism, even though I would draw a connector line between those two. That says that Judah can take the initiative because you have the goal. What's that razor you guys have? If it's good for Judah now, and if it'll lead to the reign of Messiah, you'll go for it, no matter what it is. And in this Parasha Midrash, we'll see just how much it means that you'll go for it, no matter what it is, and why you have this tendency towards Jacob. And Scripture calls the house of Judah Jacob sometimes. And the injunction is, Israel shall be your name, the overcomers of Elohim. They overcome with the righteousness of Elohim, the upright ones of Elohim. Not the Tamar cycle, not the Judah on Tamar, not the Judah on Joseph violence cycle. We need some uprightness here, brothers. We need everyone, all players, everyone needs to hold themselves to Genesis 12 and verse 3. It's not, you can disagree. We have some sharp disagreements about some things, but no cursing. Okay, well, anyway, so Kabbalists believe if it's good for us now, and if it'll lead to the reign of Mashiach, we think it doesn't matter whether it matches the Tanakh or doesn't matter if it matches the written Torah, and that's why you have an oral Torah, basically, so you can just make up whatever you need, right? So you want to stop the people from reading the written Torah. So you say, oh no, don't read the written Torah. Oh no, even returning Joseph, like we're required. That's what we have to do. We have to go back to the written Torah, and the Tanakh is an extension of that. And you guys are, oh no, no. That's like, I could never understand. I thought you guys, and Judah will claim to read the Tanakh, but it's like, and then you hear other people say, you go into a yeshiva, it's like you almost can't find a Tanakh. So, unless it's like exceptionally well funded. But basically, Judah, he's not listening to Elohim. You're listening to yourselves. Because why? Because you're studying your own books, right? Why are you doing that? This is autistic reasoning. Like you may think like leaping to conclusions, but prove me wrong. Like, why do you do that? You think you're smarter than Yahweh? You think you don't need to obey Yahweh? Orthodox Judah, you don't really read Yahweh's books unless you got like a trivia contest you want to win or something. Oh, but don't ask us to apply what we read. Don't actually like read the prophecies and then go, that looks like us. We better change. That's what we had to do. We were in Asap's house and we're like reading scripture finally because you got the printing press. So finally, each person had access to their own thing, had access to their own Bible. And before, there were always people that said, the leader of the Pope is an anti-Messiah. There's always people that said that, but they couldn't get any traction because people didn't have a copy of the Bible for themselves. Well, now you get the printing press. Now you have your own copy of the Bible. It's like, whoa, those boys were right. They were right. Okay, well, we never had access to the Talmud because why do we want to pay attention to that book, right? Unless your purpose is to try to make friends with Orthodox Judah. It's like, I'll try. It's going to take a while. They're going to have to give up that Talmud. That's not going to work. But Judah doesn't want to hear that. Why? Is because you think you only need to focus on your own writings. In Ephraim, if someone does that, like they're only focused, it's like you accuse them of navel gazing. You know what I mean? But it's like, okay, focus is good, discipline is good. But who is the Elohim here? Is he the Elohim, or we're going to read his book? Or is he the Elohim, but we're going to replace his book and do our own thing? But no, we're not. Don't say that. No, we have to keep the Talmud. What is that? Okay, now I'm just repeating factual things. And sometimes you will hear Jews or they'll accuse the Chabad or Frankism in general of being a satanic death cult, this kind of thing. I heard that first from a Jewish man. And there's a lot of Jews who really do not like the Chabad. And some other place, when we get time, we'll talk about Shlomo Carlebach and the Me Too era of Hollywood and Broadway and basically Chabad harassing women, basically. Anyway, basically, so we'll talk about this in this parasha, and we want to do so in a respectful way because this is an academic thing we're noticing in scripture, but it applies to us also. I mean, it impacts us all today. We're going to see this Tamar cycle. And the way it's played, basically, it's like whatever it takes to be king of the dog pile globally, basically. And everything is just strictly business. And, strictly business, that means that the written Torah has nothing to do with it, right? So, Joseph's point is, yes, that's exactly what we're saying. That's exactly our point. And it's embarrassing to Joseph that he should have to find a way, search for a way to school the southern kingdom, the Levitical tribe that was chosen because they were following the voice of Yahweh. Seems like they don't know what that is anymore. And seems like his book, his commandments, like what? No, that's an ancient legal precedent. For Levi not to be champion of the Torah is backwards from Joseph's way of thinking. And I can't think of a nicer way to say it. And it's sad for us. Last week, we saw that you can even become an elite Orthodox rabbi without even reading the Tanach once, not one time. So to us, this is what Amos is talking about in Amos 2 and verse 4, is that Orthodox Judah is not listening to Elohim's voice, like is the main primary commandment in the Torah. He's not listening to the voice, and he's not obeying the commandments, the written word of Elohim, which is just what his voice said, that is recorded down for generations. You're doing something else. You're listening to the rabbis, and it's like they're just completely taking verses out of context and spinning these tractates and spinning these things. And again, you don't even need to read the Tanakh once to become an elite rabbi. So you know that the Talmud is the same as the Tanakh. How do you know that? You guys don't even read the Tanakh. Your elite rabbis don't even read the Tanakh. So how do you know that the Talmud is the same as the Tanakh? How do you know that the Talmud is the only valid interpretation of the Tanakh when the two books say completely different things One has Elohim as the speaker, as the talent, as they would say, and other people supporting cast. We're receiving the ketubah from him. It's not, and it's like, and in the Talmud, it's kind of like you guys have been given the authority to set Torah, even though you haven't even read the original one. It's like, how does that work? Seems like very far astray from the original role of the tribe of Levi, and Levi being chosen because you were the ones to say, that's it, we're going to stand with Elohim. Whoever is on Yahweh's side, come to me. That's a paraphrase. What happened to that, brothers? I mean, this is like a Korach. Forgive me, respectfully, but it looks like to Joseph is that basically you're a Korach's rebellion that made it, and corporate narcissism to boot. You kind of have to be. How much of a narcissist do you have to be to know that it's your job to to teach the received 5 books of Moses? But you don't want to do that. You want to place those as your authority book. That's all passé. If you have children, right? I mean, you want to tell your children, this is what mom or dad, but this is what dad says to do, and you want to tell your children what they need to know. You want to try to explain things, the world to them, and how do you feel if they then take your instructions, memorialize it, so to speak, and create an entirely new set of instructions to replace what you yourself said, and then say it's the only valid interpretation of what you yourself said? Are you proud of your son when he does that kind of a thing? Would you be pleased? So I don't know. Maybe things are different for the tribe of Judah. That's not our business to tell the tribe of Judah how to be. It's our job to tell the tribe of Judah that we can or cannot come back home, that we can or cannot unite to form the Genesis 35 alliance. And right now we cannot, because Judah, like it or not, is in the kingship role in that. But you guys have a different book. And forgive me for saying so, if you have a different book, then we have all the signs of worshiping a different Elohim. And I take a close look at Kabbalah. I take a close look at what's really behind the Chaldean worship that was supposedly sanitized and cleaned up, except it goes back way further than that. It goes back to Amos, and Amos is talking about a pre-existing pattern. You can find the same things in Jeremiah. I feel like I've stepped into Jeremiah. And then when I step into Jeremiah and look at Amos, it's like, why am I here? And the only thing I've seen, maybe there's something earlier than this, but you have the future kingship tribe going off to have illicit, adulterate sex with Tamar. And maybe you didn't mean to do it, but maybe one Jewish tribal person inducing another Jewish tribal person to do things that are against the Torah. And you don't take it as safeguards. And Joseph is just supposed to do whatever the rabbis say, right? I mean, so for full disclosure, I am not an expert on the Talmud, and after these last few weeks, I do not want to be. So, and I went in looking initially for, what was the prime minister talking about with the Rebbe Schneerson? Like, what's that all about? So I came in looking basically for cabal theory, you might say. And not only did I find that in unexpected ways that trace back to Parasha Vayeshev with the Judah on Joseph violence cycle, we're also seeing the Tamar cycle crop up. And I'm not an expert on the Chabad, although I've known quite a few. I've known some Chabad. And from what I understand and from what I've read and from what I've been told, and people who've left the Chabad, my understanding is that they're supposed to be, Mashiach is supposed to come when the world reaches its lowest state. And you can find support for that in the renewed covenant, even. You can find it in Tanach. So, I mean, that's when Mashiach will come, is when the world has reached its lowest state. But so the problem, people's complaints with the Chabad is that rather than fix up the world to make the world right, tikkun ha'olam, The Frankists are secretly basically throwing themselves down to the base of Judah and Tamar's ladder, so to speak. And that's what we're going to see in this, as shocking as it is, that's what we're going to see in this week's Parasha Midrash. So for Nazarene or Christians, it's think about the time the adversary tempted Yeshua in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 6. And he said to him, if you are the son of Elohim, throw yourself down. For it is written, he shall give his messengers charge over you, and in their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Sorry, I should have found that in the Tanach. I'll give you that quotation. I'm sure you can find it. So if you've read the Tanakh. So basically what you have with my understanding of Kabbalism is limited, but basically you have your Kabbalists throwing themselves down at the base of the ladder, or in this case, Judah and Tamar's ladder. And basically from a Nazaree or a Nazarene point of view, basically the rabbis are abusing Elohim's favor, is how it would be put in the Josephite world. And because they're seed of Judah, they feel that nothing bad is going to happen to them as long as they have the right heart. They can break all the commandments as long as they have the right heart. They consider that the principles or the precepts of the matter or something like this. And to us, that's very similar to how Christians abuse Yeshua's sacrifice by claiming his name and then not doing what he said and not being careful to follow everything that he said to do. And we tie that back to Joseph's rich, spoiled brat kids, basically, because they're too good, they're too special. They expect, they're entitled, you see. Yes. So then on the other hand, coming back to the house of Judah, the southern kingdom, basically the Tamar situation comes back into view. So you have your Kabbalists, Lurianic Kabbalists, including Chabad, and Frankists, including Chabad. Basically, they're trying to hurry along the devolution of the world so that Mashiach ben Yosef can come sooner. And they make great profits for themselves, which they hope to be able to use to provide Mashiach ben Yosef with basically not only Skynet at his disposal, but basically, well, the only problem is that you need a Mashiach ben Yosef that's going to worship according to the Talmud as opposed to the Tanach. And with all love and respect, Elohim forbid that should ever happen. We'll also find in our study on the Tamar cycles, they show up again in places like the book of Esther, and where you have Esther basically with a covert foreign marriage into the foreign nation or the enemy's kingship lines. And so it's got to be hard if you're a father that actually cares about your children. It's got to be very difficult to marry off your children internationally. So, if you love your daughter, if you love Esther, you don't want to lose her generationally. I mean, Elohim forbid, you've lost your daughter. That's horrible. So what are you going to do? And I think a lot of this stuff, Ephraim, it's the same kind of thing. Judah reads the parashiot and reads the prophecies without thinking how they apply to him. I think Ephraim is guilty of the exact same thing. Manasseh absolutely is guilty. Oh, and I need to clarify. Sorry. It's not correct. I thought about it. I prayed about it. It's not correct to say that, it's more how I feel about it. It's not correct to say that if Ephraim isn't being dedicated, that he's Manasseh. That's an incorrect statement. Ephraim and Manasseh are two separate deals, I hate to call them two separate species. But so you have Ephraim basically is just lazy. He's entitled and he thinks he's fine without Torah. Torah light, as Rabbi Reuven said. So yeah, I would say they're definitely guilty. Or he didn't say that. That was my take, right? So yeah, I think Joseph is, particularly Ephraim, is absolutely. Joseph was a hard worker. Joseph worked. Joseph studied. Joseph did a lot of good stuff. Ephraim, I hate to say, kind of spoiled brat syndrome. So sometimes we don't think about, okay, you're this nation. You're actually a nation. You've got land now. You've got a government. You've got, of course, you can neither confirm nor deny that you have nuclear weapons, et cetera, et cetera. But you certainly have an air force. You certainly have many, 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 many capabilities. And a lot of those capabilities come from going undercover, just like Tamar, right? Just like Rabbi Shabtai or Saturn Zevi went undercover in a generational undercover operation, later to become the Don May, as they explain in the book. And just like Rabbi Jacob Frank later went undercover in the generational undercover op to become the Jesuit order, right? And now we have a Jesuit, and it's something that I'm not an expert on that. Uh, it's the subject of some discussion whether the Jesuit order is still under control or whether it's wandered off in a way. But they seem, if we had visuals, we'd show you some quotes where the Catholic Church has sure changed over the years. So anyway, and then you think about it, it's kind of like, well, in addition to the feasts of Yahweh, we also have Hanukkah and Purim, which are not commanded by Yahweh, but they're at least as popular as the feasts of Yahweh. And maybe could that perhaps possibly have any, say, general relation to the fact why Judah seems to like Purim so much? Is that Purim, if you think about it, it's as a genre, it's kind of about secret undercover marriages and making covert undercover generations of agents or zera or covert bloodlines. And then those covert bloodlines, they have seed, they have zera, and those zera manage to break through at just the right time. When you're hearing the footsteps of Mashiach ben Yosef, you break through. But who's breaking through? It's Peretz. So on the one hand, you have the kingship line, and then you have the hidden agent seed lines. And it's all, there's witnesses to it. I mean, again, you can't see the deer, but you can see the footsteps for the deer. You can hear the sound of the footsteps of Mashiach ben Yosef. So, okay, so in the disciple discussion, as long as we're here, one moment. I need to see if I can get a pause button put in. But on the one hand, you could say, on the one hand, it's sort of the beast of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7 that goes around devouring and breaking in pieces and trampling down the residue with its feet and crushing down all this. And it's not, Judah's not the one doing it, but perhaps maybe Judah's the one riding it. So you have I read the book, now you have a movie, Dune, where the kid rides the sandworm. So you get, that's nothing. Like Judah's writing Babylon, right? So that's why it's called the Babylonian Talmud. So we'll make, in the Abraham Accords series, we'll make the case that Judah is in the head of Babylon. Both Ephraim and Ishmael are in the feet. So that explains a lot right there, but that's way too much to unpack here. But so basically, and we'll see in Zechariah 6 that it's the black horse, it's the black ops horse, it's Judah that leads, actually. So I was thinking completely the opposite. I didn't realize this last week. No, started listening to the Parasha. It's like, no, Judah's in the lead. Judah's leading this. So this is, I mean, A+ for operational security there, or well, maybe A+, A- maybe. Anyway, basically, I'll give you a solid A. Basically, the Frankists are doing as much evil in secret as they can, basically. And they're pretending on the surface that they're Jews, that they're keeping Torah and keeping Talmud or whatever. It's like they just kind of do whatever they want, right? It's kind of like high power nuclear cannon free agentry, sort of. And as we take a look, it's just sort of a lot of giving in to the whole Tamar, the whole Judah on Tamar cycle. And there's plans for the Talmudic law will become the global law as soon as the world is under their hand. And by the way, if my editor has time to get these clips in there, if anyone has better, higher quality, or if you check the description, anyone has better quality or knows what the original file is, please send us that URL for these videos. But we have the soundtrack. And so just a question for the rabbi. When you talk about how we should help the rabbis in any way possible, do you mean by promoting, forgive me for the use of the technical terms, do you mean that we should help you to promote the pedophilia and the murder and the identity theft of Joseph that is enshrined in the Holy Talmud? And are you assuming that Mashiach ben Yosef, why would he want to trade in the word of Elohim for the opinions of some rabbis who are listening? I'm not sure we don't know what they're listening to, but it's not the Tanakh, that's for sure. And it's of concern, extreme concern to Joseph that the house of Judah, the rabbis seem like they're spending time with Yahweh and listening to his word. At least that's how they pretend. But in actual fact, they do not listen to the Tanakh. They have their own books they make, and they analyze the commentary and the commentary and the commentary and the commentary and the commentary. And instead of crediting Yahweh Elohim Tsevaot, we hear credits to Adonai and Hashem, which is not the names. We understand the arguments, but that's not what he says to call him. So, and it's of concern, of extreme concern to Joseph that Judah effectively, well, the Black Ops horse effectively takes spiritual warfare to the whole new level. And then we're going to see here your Tamar cycle. So, wow. Okay. So at the same time, we're looking at hopefully this will all become clearer when we get to the Abraham Accords series, because we'll be able to start at Genesis 1:1 and just proceed forward like that. But we're just going to kind of keep our comments to ourselves at the moment and try to keep things as clinical as possible. But some of the things are difficult for an autistic person to deal with. So autistic people have difficulty processing emotions in what they would call a neuronormal way, where we're neuroatypical. So each one is a separate case. There's usually a very high morality and ethics component. There's things our world has to make sense from a moral and ethical standpoint, or we can't play. We're out of here. So what Joseph, well, I know myself, I mean, as I came back, I mean, again, I got called in 57, 59, got turned on 57, 60, got turned on to the whole Israel news thing. And, well, anyway, we're just always hoping to find someone in the house of Judah who hastens to hear the voice of Yahweh and to obey it, like King David did, at least in his early years. King David, it's that's what got King David to be king. He listened for Yahweh's voice, and when he heard it, he hastened to do everything Yahweh's voice said. That's what prophets do. They listen. And he was not just a king, he was also a prophet. Why? Because he listened for Yahweh's voice. I mean, you'll forgive me if you think you're listening to his voice, but if you're truly listening to his voice, why are you still committing the same sins that we find in Jeremiah and elsewhere? Why are we trading off our signet ring and our cord and our staff in order to do what? In order to follow the face value of the Tanakh, in order to follow the face value of the written Torah. And again, well, without getting too far into Frankist histories in China, if you check, I mean, realize that Mao, China, never mind, we'll cover that some other time. But how should we say? If you check Mao's 3 phases of operations, covert operations, the final phase is you have to come out on top. And some people think that Judah might have hand to hand in helping communism get its start, first in Russia, then in China. You hear rumors, you read books, you listen to Jews talk about what they do when they think you're not listening. So the thing is, in order to win the third and final phase, you must convert to above board warfare. And this is something Joseph wants you to do. Joseph needs the kingship tribe to win. And we're very concerned because if Judah thinks that Judah is going to win without doing things Elohim's way, how's that going to work? I mean, you can use, there were 12 spies. It's part of kingship, but The Tamar cycle is something else. So let's continue. Um, 12 spies, Esther. There's this parasha. What else do we have to reconcile in this on short order? So basically, if you are Judah, so this is something I want to speak to the house of Joseph. If you are Judah and you are a tiny little country and you don't have, you don't have, you know, what are you going to do? How are you going to provide for safety if you don't use a lot of agentry and if you don't have this kind of a thing? So, for one example, Hitler, for whatever reason, invaded Russia, and Russia is just that big, and because the winters are just that cold, and because the Russians are just that tough, Hitler ran out of manpower and supplies. But you can't do that if you're this country, this tiny little country in the Middle East, and you're surrounded by this ocean of enemies. So what can you do? You have to have good eyes and ears. Some of them electronic, some of them agreements with other foreign allies and this kind of thing. But if you're gonna survive, and Judah's had just had a tough time. If you're going to survive and not only survive, but also effectively prepare a highway in the desert for your Messiah. Uh, well, wow. Yeah. I mean, Judah is operating at levels that Joseph doesn't find convenient or comfortable, I suppose. So that's what you're seeing with this whole Torah light business, basically, is privileged Joseph. So, but we're talking about the Tamar cycles here. And I'd have to take a look at the technical definitions to say whether it's technically incest or what it was. It's not exactly Yibum. And from this difficult liaison, shall we say, there were two different lines of seed, and both of them call themselves Jews. So you had Peretz, right, the one that breaks through, and you had Zerah, kind of secret seed lines. And this is different again. So this is very similar to how it is in Manasseh, or excuse me, in Ephraim, in Joseph. You have Ephraim and Manasseh. And one of the differences, getting all confused, it's really hard to try and keep one foot in the Josephite world and try to relate by putting one foot in the Judahite world. It's just like, you talk about making your head spin. Wow. It's trying to reconcile those two things. So, but there is, for example, there is a difference between Ephraim and Manasseh. So you say Joseph, Mashiach ben Yosef. Okay, well, that's great. So, but Ephraim basically is pro, and Manasseh is basically anti. And then you have Esav, which is something else, which is what chapter 2 of the documentary series will be about. So basically, you have, and it gets complicated. It gets really, really complicated. But to oversimplify it, and there is it's not limited just to this, and we're not focused on the past. Hopefully, we're focused on today and the future. But so basically, you have the United States, which is prophetic Ephraim, and there are other Ephraimites in other countries. But as a nation, that's where it's also it's also the land of Babylon of Jeremiah 50 and 51. So that's you end up. I mean, America has its other. The Christians are going to point the finger at the Jews, and the Jews are pointing the finger at the Christians, and then in the future we'll see rabbis teaching that America has to be destroyed. And yeah, we want to see Jeremiah 50:51 come to pass also, but somehow we need to shake Judah loose of this concept that Joseph and Esau are the same, because they're not. Even inside of Joseph, you have two different types. So we'll talk about that in more detail in the Abraham Accords series. Uh, so the differences between the two houses, differences between Judah and Joseph. So you have basically someone has to hold the scepter, and we'll talk about the role of Gad in the future, but someone has to hold the scepter, and that doesn't change. The scepter doesn't leave Judah. So the Rothschilds, who funded the Frank, or at least reportedly funded both Shabtai Zevi and Jacob Frank, are sometimes called the kings of the Jews. And any kingship. I mean, United States, you have a CIA. That's a whole separate. Let's not even open that can of worms. And you get also in the NSA. And you get all sorts of agentry going on in the United States. United States is a big country. It's kind of like Israel does not have any luxuries. So I just say this because I've met people who consider themselves Ephraimites, but they hate Judah in their heart. So if I can emphasize one point to both houses, is that Genesis 12 and verse 3 and Leviticus emphasizes that we not hate our brothers in our heart. If we're doing something wrong, let's hear about it. Because from the Tanach, we don't hear from Talmud. We do not, we will not. We'll show you more reasons why. Okay, let's continue. But again, okay, third phase of Maoist, and I'm sure they had some help in developing their theology, but the third phase is you have to go back to conventional. You have to go above board. So we want to see Judah succeed. We do not see Talmud as being a valid pathway to success. And we say that with all the respect and with all the love. We love you. We care about you as our brothers. We're very concerned what will happen for you or those of you who follow the Talmud. We do not believe it is an accurate reflection. But we would like Joseph to realize that the kingship does a dirty job. And I think sometimes Ephraim is guilty of just thinking, oh, Manasseh too, we just have to say such nice, pretty prayers and done. And there's no work to do. It's a very common, you'll find that throughout Joseph. He's just like, oh, we just pray. You'll find that in Esau also. It's just pray, done. And then they revert back to the mystery Babylonian system after that. Joseph in general does not understand or appreciate the very difficult and hard, dirty job that Judah's been doing. However, if you are of the two-house persuasion, which obviously Orthodox Jews are, or was, why did you hijack my computer? Or if you were consider yourself a two-house person on the Josephite side, let's take a look at Bereshit or Genesis chapter 49 and verse 8. We're talking about the prophecies over Judah in the end times. So it says, this is Israel. So he says, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. So we have Joseph cursing Judah. Do we have Joseph praising Judah yet? I think we do. We have some organizations, they don't know that they're Joseph. They will give it 2 or 3 generations and 2 more wars. So I think part of the problem, you have a lot of Ephraimites who think that the rules don't apply to them. It's like a Watergate. It's like, we're not we're above the law. And that doesn't cut it with Elohim. That's not good. Notice here, Joseph has to see, it says, Judah's hand shall be on the neck of his enemies. Okay, well, guess what? So now we have Judah's hand on Joseph's neck, because Judah considers Joseph to be his enemy. That's what the Birchat Haminim is all about. You take a look on Wikipedia. The Birchat Haminim just spells, it's kind of thick reading. We'll break it down for you. I forget which chapter, but it's coming up. So, but basically that's why Judah asks for Joseph's death 3 times every day in the Birchat Haminim. It's not because he doesn't know who Joseph is. Judah knows who Joseph is, doesn't he? I mean, everybody saw me, so everyone knows it's me. It's kind of scared me half out of my. I didn't know. I had no idea. It was kept completely in the dark. I had no idea what was going on. Some woman in a coffee shop, she's just like, oh, he's going to turn in here. And I just like half jumped out of my skin. I was like, I didn't know what the deal was. It turned out everybody knew who I was. So you guys know who I am. Okay. So, and then just like, bam, the thing is closed off. And I'm still having a hard time, as an autistic person, I'm still having a hard time digesting. It's like I'm expected to be a pop-up doll or something like that. And, it's like Judah is going to choreograph the Mashiach ben Yosef role for like the last 200 years or something like that. And then I'm just expected, or some Christian, some Hebrew-minded, Jerusalem-loving, Judah-loving Christian who loves Judah regardless, no matter what happens. He loves him, even though he has to protect himself and his children from him right now. But yeah, and again, I didn't complete my doctorate. I mean, I unenrolled before it began because I realized, no, you have to approach through the Spirit directly. You're not going to get there from here through intellect alone. You have to enter in. But I mean, I've done some studies in narcissistic personality disorders, so I'm not qualified to say that Judah qualifies as a corporate narcissistic organization. But we'll talk about that some other time. The thing is, for Joseph, it's clear to us if we have and even Josephites, they're not really sure what's going on yet. They're still orienting, and like they talk about leaving the church and coming to the Messianic movement. Even the Messianic movement, they're like, wow, it's like taking a sip from a fire hose. It's like, yeah, come on, and that's just the Messianic portion. They're like not even ready for Nazarene Israel, but they will. Give it 7 years. Talk on this again in 7 years. So they understand in concept, they understand in theory that Judah is the kingship tribe and that Judah has kingship powers. And I don't want to say kingship special powers, superpowers or something, but basically, yeah. I mean, there's a blessing that goes along with the kingship, and there's a blessing that goes along with taking the initiative like Judah does. But the problem is, I mean, isn't all of that authority contingent upon obeying the commander's commands? And how do you know if you're obeying the commander's commands except by reading his commandments? We want to be respectful, but to us, to Joseph, it's kind of like, it's like you've taken your Yetzer Hara that we'll see here in the Tamar cycle. You've taken your Yetzer Hara and you've turned it into this idol, it's kind of like Fantasy Island, or I mean, I don't know what people watch, but I guess they have this holodeck or something in Star Trek or something like that, and does Judah understand what happened when he traded off symbols of authority for intercourse? And does Judah understand the long-term generational vulnerability of doing things that way? So, I mean, are we taking the Nachmanides cycle in the matter of Judah on Tamar? Are we taking that as a legal precedent and its authority to go ahead and behave that way? Or are we taking this as, whoa, we need to watch ourselves in this department? We need to make sure we walk correctly before our Elohim, or else how is he going to know? How is he going to know? So this is what I'm saying, brothers. You can have, well, it's a subject for another time, but you have basically the honeypots and the sexploits, PG-13. You have the sexploits of Mossad and other Tamar-like agencies, and these Tamar-like agencies basically are used to bring Judah back to the land, but in a way that does not make the Elohim of all the earth proud or happy or glad. Because why? Because we're not listening to his voice and we're not obeying his commandments, which is just a written record of everything he said earlier. And we're responsible for everything he ever said. So that's why we left out, it was written Torah. We're coming back. It's like, no, it needs to be Tanach. Because yeah, sure. Sure. The written Torah, but you need to read all the words of Elohim. That's how Joseph sees it, and that's the only way we broke free from Esau. So, I mean, and to us, it's just mind numbing. It seems like you've taken your Yetzer Hara and you've put it up on a pedestal, kind of like as a Torah scroll, kind of a thing. I mean, you've turned it into the Talmud. It's like the Book of Tamar, kind of the Book of Judah on Tamar. So then you have the kingship tribe trading off witnesses to his authority by harlotry. Yeah. So what? Never. I shouldn't say that. So where does all this lead, brothers? Like, and forgive me, but to speak the truth in love. Okay, you shall not bear sin. because of your neighbor, because of your brother, but you shall surely reprove your neighbor. We want to prove you correct. We want to prove that Judah is still paying attention to Elohim and hasn't just wandered off in his own direction into navel gazing or one of those endless rooms of mirrors. Brothers, in love, where does all the pedophilia in the Hazal, in the Talmud and other places, where does that come from? Unless what you're doing effectively is codifying your Tamar-like urges, codifying your Yetzer Hara, and then seeking to legitimize your Yetzer Hara and turning into this codified Talmud is kind of like, the emperor has no clothes. And now you're seeking to turn into law over the whole rest of the world. In the original story of the emperor has no clothes, the emperor, when he's told that he has no clothes, he becomes even prouder. I've seen a lot of that in the Ephraimite world. That's why most of Ephraim's not going to come home. Ephraim's too proud to go back to the Tanach. Ephraim's too drunk to come back and obey the literal wording of the Tanakh. What can you say? Ephraim also forgets who the king is. So, it's tough for Joseph because we want to come home, but you hate the prophets. You've always hated prophets. That's why you tried to kill Joseph. You hated prophets. You hated prophet, even though the prophecy that was that he would save your life, basically. You hated him for it. So we're over here. We're not in the land right now. And no one has ever apologized for killing Yeshua. Why? Because of the Talmud. We'll talk about that another time. So this might be an autistic question, but whatever happened to the concept of not sinning? Whatever happened to the concept of making sure you listen for the voice of Elohim and hasten to do everything that he said to do? That's why Levi was chosen, because Levi was for Yahweh and his word. He wanted to do things the way Yahweh said to do it. And that's why Levi got the priesthood, because before them, it was the priesthood of the firstborn. They fell down on the job. Levi jumped up. You're the new priesthood. That's how it is with a king. Always be doing the right thing, and you might get a chance someday. But what do you do when he picks you, he appoints you, he anoints you as the new Levitical order, and you're going to do your own thing? So basically, we'll talk all about this in the documentary, but basically what Judah has done is you've changed the definitions of evil and good. And you say, well, but no, there's 37 volumes in this one and 23 or whatever it is in the Jerusalem Talmud. So you have 60 volumes or whatever it is. I don't even know. I'm not an expert. It's like, yeah, you have 60 volumes and all of it exchanges the definitions of evil and good. It's like, why? Okay, so let's finish with the 1666 book cover, and then we'll midrash. Then we'll talk all about how it applies to today, because there's so many hints. Remezim. Sorry about the English. It's just a question of time. So it says the Sabbateans, who are now, we'll talk about this some other time. The Sabbateans, get the book. It's really a good book. The Sabbateans, who are now secretly the Dunmei in the Islamic world. I hope that's the correct way to pronounce it. Dunmei. So basically, they're covert Jews. They're Zera. They're seed. They're hidden in the Islamic world. So, I don't know, but there's reports that various Islamic countries, we'll leave them unnamed here. We'll look them up some other time. But yeah, various countries in the Muslim world you could name. Basically, the heads of state are thought to be Dunmei. And so that's the Sabbatean, the Shabbatai or Saturn Zevi, the devil planet Zevi, right? Okay, and then you have his successors, which is an interesting story, very well done in the book. And I don't usually give flowing book reviews. So then they have the successors. Then you had the Frankists. You had Jacob Frank. And basically, when they had to go undercover, they became the Jesuits. And So you had the Jesuits, and then of course, because they went undercover, they had to do an extra good job and this kind of a thing. So it's, I mean, actually, yeah. Anyway, so Joseph knows from our studies. I mean, I don't know what everyone's reading, but I just know in general there's a lot of material out there about the Judah and Tamar like activities of the Vatican. So it's just a parallel. Thought we'd mention it, but on the back cover it says, you know, that it's the Sabbatean Frankist, the Kabbalistic, the Lurianic, the Arye, that's pronunciation, but the Ari and his people, uh, his offshoots, basically it's like trying to take the powers of the Chaldean demon worship basically and try and clean it up. It's like, I asked one rabbi one time, he said it's like kosher witchcraft. I'm like, what? Because we're commanded not to add and not to take away, not to replace, not to substitute. Anyway, move on. So he says, including, but not limited to, religious orgies, ritual sacrifices, incest. Okay, there's Tamar. Then you have adultery, as Tamar, and even homosexuality, which is going to show up again in the Talmud. And there is just so much prepubescent child love written in the pages of the Hazal and the Talmud. Anyway, so this has been going on for at least the last 350 years, because that's when the Ari gave the green light to take the initiative. Because according to the, again, I'm not an expert on it, but this is what we understand, is that basically things took a big shift around the time of the Ari. And then now Judah basically can take the initiative. And this is what it looks like, is breaking the face value of the Torah, the written Torah. And then we wonder, why does Yahweh say things like, you know, Judah and Ephraim, you're doing things by your own power and strength, when he says not by power, not by might, but by his spirit. So Ephraim knows what his spirit is all about. He's just lazy about it, and that's not going to work for him. We'll talk about that some other time. So, okay, so everything on the back cover up until now, up to this point, basically that's just recorded history. I've read it in other places. There's many witnesses to that. Okay, so but now the author says, the back cover, he says, using such secret societies as the Masons, this diabolical sect has infiltrated, and he has a typo, he says infiltrated. So, you know, it could be a real word, because they do seek to infiltrate to the fullest. So, but the thing is, we would encourage Joseph to remember, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. And you shall also remember that Judah is the kingship tribe. And it's not nice to say, but you do have spies in the Torah, you know. So Judah would, never mind, cover that later. It's spying is a legitimate kingship function if you do it right, and if it's done while obeying the correct spirit and not a Chaldean spirit. So for Josephites, you do have generational spies in Esther. You know, I mean, you go undercover, not everyone comes home to land. So you do have generational spies right there in the Tanach. So it's kind of shocking when you see some of the things that are done. I don't want to. I'm just going to leave that alone. I'd rather not comment on that right now. But you know, we have noticed that Judah does love the book of Esther and also Purim, basically because it's, to what it looks like to us, it's basically Tamar-like sexpionage. And maybe that's maybe not nice to say, but sexpionage is effective. It works. Grooming works. That's for sure. And so it says on the book, it says, they have infiltrated into the highest echelons of political power. So we've seen this. I mean, it's common knowledge in Joseph what's going on. So Judah uses agents like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and they use Tamar-like methods. So Sepper says the They covertly rule as the unelected hidden hand shaping history behind a veil of conspiracy. And you have Karl Marx and Simon Bolivar, not sure, Simon Bolivar, many other well-known Masons with their hands hidden, the hidden hand symbology. So this, what could be? What is their secret global agenda? Okay, well, whatever could their agenda be? Does it have any relationship to the Talmud, perhaps? And so you have the basically the Mossad's Tamarist, Frankist modus operandi. Basically, you have Bible, sword, and honeypot, and Bible, sword, and zera, Bible, sword, and generational bloodlines, Bible, sword, and secret agents. So it's that part's not really a mystery. That's just Judah is taking a completely different take on the Torah with regard to spies, and a completely different take on the book of Esther. And we can talk about those. I mean, that's a whole separate subject in itself. I probably won't have time for that while I'm alive. We got a lot of things to do here. We just took, well, keep moving. So Orthodox agenda is the Talmud. It's always been that way. It's been that way since the days of Judah and Tamar. And it's just played out. So Judah and Tamar, then days of Esther, then days of 1666. And then now we have it is as it is today. Now we have Don May, we have Jesuits. Everyone knows these things. This book just, to me, put it all together very nicely. Amos 2 and verse 4. Also Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 1. They let us know that there is a cycle that Judah likes to take their own counsel. They like to navel gaze. They like to read commentary on a commentary and commentary and commentary rather than go straight to the source and hear from Yahweh's words himself. Why? We don't get it. Joseph does not understand. Joseph cannot believe that Judah was listening for Elohim's voice when he cohabited with Tamar in Genesis 38. We just don't believe it. We do not believe Judah was putting an emphasis on hearing the voice of his Elohim. And sadly, that makes King David, how shall I say, an exception. Or yeah, you had more. Well, keep going. You had good Jewish kings who listened for Yahweh's voice, but that it died out. So we do not know how Judah plans to make the final transition from covert to overt. We believe that Judah is probably, perhaps, how shall we say, well-versed in Maoist doctrine and the third phase and what that's all about. We just hope that Judah understands what that actually means with reference to the Tanach. And it's not our job to tell people how to do it, just to say this is something Joseph can't come home until you do thoroughly and completely well. And we have all confidence in Judah's ability to do this. We know that Jews are extremely intelligent. They're curious. They love to ask questions. They love to ask Elohim. They don't mind pressing into a matter. They know how to find out what they want. And Joseph would prefer to humbly request anything of the kingship tribe. However, at this point, given the fact that Judah is not listening effectively, and given the fact that Joseph's lives and children are in danger, Joseph needs to lovingly insist that Judah goes back to the Tanakh, so that together, Judah and Joseph can build the Genesis 35 alliance together, as it says in Genesis chapter 35 in verse 11. And this as an alternative preferable to Joseph being slaughtered in the progressing Talmudic plan. And there's a lot of people in Joseph who are somewhat concerned or upset, unhappy about this kind of thing. And one reason why is because Judah leads Joseph around. So we'll talk about that when we get to Zechariah 6. We'll see that's actually biblical. So we'll talk about that later. But right now we're trying to basically patch the parasha from last week because there's so much to this Judah and Tamar cycle, and it plays into Miketz, and it also plays into the next at least two parashiot, and then I'm not sure after that, we'll see. But for example, just for one example among many, we have a video of President Donald Trump before he was president, partying with none other than Jeffrey Epstein, who is believed to have been a Frankist Mossad agent. Can anyone see a Tamar connection here? Can anyone see a Nachmanides or Ramban cycle? And a lot of Joseph, Manasseh, Ephraim, they get upset when these kinds of things occur because, again, agents like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and many others. We're talking about 1% of the. We're talking about, but we have no idea how many are actually agents. There's a lot of Chabad. They're not agents. There's a lot of Chabad. They might know nothing. They might not know anything about this, even if they're new. But of course, if they stick around Chabad long enough, they're either going to find out. There's been a lot of Chabad that's left. Come to Yeshua. I mean, they've believe that they're Frankist because Frankism basically says that you can do evil in order to do good. So that's that same thing, Hitler did, basically. The end justifies the means, so to speak. That was Hitler's philosophy. So he was going to do evil. He was going to break Genesis 12 and verse 3 in order to do something good. It's like, wow, excuse me, how are you going to do something good by breaking Yahweh's Torah? How's that work? He's got these eternal commandments. It's like the 10 commandments expanded. It's like, this is your midrash right here. Like what he wanted, the thing, when we left Egypt, the very first thing that he wanted was for us to just hear his voice. The priesthood of the firstborn, that was the thing he wanted. And of course, we didn't do it. So that's why we had to get a Levitical order and you had to follow his instructions. That's all out the window now with the book of Tamar. So you even have, Russian President Vladimir Putin also takes direction from the Chabad. And some interesting things. His mother's maiden name was Jewish, and Orthodox Judaism tracks through the mother's side. So little things like that. Also, just the fact that during the Soviet Union, basically the churches were all closed or extremely limited, while the synagogues were all open. Oh, and it was the death penalty for anti-Semitism. So you have people who pretend to be Christian listening very, very carefully to people who are Chabad, the chief Chabad rabbi for Russia. It's like, is that in like Jared Kushner and President Trump, or like, how's that work? Not sure. Anyway, I don't know. That's all speculation, of course. So, but highly recommend this very interesting little book. So the price, of course, is $16.66. Very cute. It's 73 pages, and it just reads seamlessly. And basically, the reason we bring it up here only is one, to help. Well, one, we have to catalog the recent Tamar-like misadventures of Judah, Peretz, and Zerah of the past 350 years. However, that's best said. As an autistic person, you're never really sure where the line is. So I'm trying to speak the truth in love. I'm trying to make friends with Brother Judah. Not sure how that's going to work, but that's the command. So if you guys liked what Elohim gave me back in, what was that, 2016, so that'd be 5773. Don't quote me on that. If you like that, no, it can't be 50. No, it's 5776. If you like the Revelation study, this is way bigger than that. So we had to plan it for 9 or 10 months just to have it organized. So anyway, I would recommend this book to anyone who wants to know whether I'll be able to, I like to know a subject before I teach on it, before I rewrite the Bible, before I issue a translation. I like to know what it says. Mercy sakes alive. This is a good little book. There's lots of other materials out there. This is the best, easiest short summation that I know of. I would change the typo on the back cover, and other than that, I wouldn't change anything. And I will be happy we will be happy to buy the prime minister or any member of Knesset or any Orthodox rabbi a copy who wants one. And we're not a rich ministry, but we'll be happy to do it if you will read it, because what it does is it shows basically how the Mossad and how all these operations and things, it shows how it comes out of Genesis 38 and the Judah and Tamar cycle. And we don't want to be in judgment of the kingship house for kingship functions that may seem shocking and nasty to Joseph. But not everything in the kingship cycle is above the board. I understand that. So, but the thing is, if you're going to have operatives, they've got to be guaranteed that what they're doing is going to work for Elohim. And how can that be when Judah has forgotten whose book they should be reading? We don't understand. Like, how can you say Torah? It's like Ephraim. And like Torah. What he means is like resting and reading on Sabbath and talking with his friends. That's Torah to Ephraim. But you guys do all the organization, all the initiative. But what are you building? Yeah, I mean, when I look at what the Talmud wants and when I look at what the Tanach wants, those are two completely different things. Those things are not the same. So really, we have kind of, and I want to say this with all the respect, but we have to be real. This is the world that we live in, and our job is to fix this world up. How can we do that if we can't even talk? So William James, famous Christian psychologist, that was his basic thesis, is the number one cause of dysfunction in families is because of secrets. That's it. That's the number one cause. People are not allowed to talk. People are not allowed to speak the truth in love. Then you get dysfunction. I mean, Judah's got, well, anyway, we need to speak the truth in love. And we do not see the Talmud as being truthful because it's not the word of Elohim. And to pretend that something is not the word of Elohim is the replacement of the word of Elohim when Elohim said not to replace, not to add, not to subtract. That just doesn't work for us. So let's go to the Talmud Tractate Tamar, Talmud Tractate Sanhedrin 69a. Hope you haven't eaten. Rabbi Yirmiyah of Difti says, we learn in another Mishnah, and he's referring to Tractate Nidah 44b as well. So sorry we don't have these up on screen. He said he would try, but he doesn't have much time. So meaning he's referring to Nidah 44b. So we learned in another Mishnah as well that one should follow the majority opinion of the rabbis. One should follow the majority, meaning the majority opinion of the rabbis, basically democracy, even in cases of capital or death penalty law. So if you look that up, we've used the Sefaria website for all this. It's just so easy to copy and paste. And again, well, so Nidah 44, that'd be like the front side would be 44a and the back side of the page would be 44b. It's just an older numbering system. Today it'd be page 88 and 89 or something like that, something similar. 87, 88, I'm not sure, but you get the idea. So now, however, so that's what the Talmud says. So now let's contrast that to Shemot or Exodus chapter 23 and verse 2, which tells, and we were all there, all 12 tribes, we were all there. So this was given to Joseph. It says, you shall not follow a crowd to do evil. And what that means, for us, evil was when King Jeroboam tried to take the written Torah away from us. And we were stupid and we fell for it. Bad mistake. Then we got taken into Esau's house. And then after that, we were able to get free from Esau's house after the end of a times and half a time of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. And then it took us all the way until right between the first and second intifadas to break free of the curse of Jeroboam. That's how long we've been in captivity. We've been in captivity for over 3/4 of Israel's history, if you begin with, I believe, Abraham. We're in the numbers here, and it's all, we've been gone for more than 3/4, and we just get the idea, if we start to pay attention to Elohim and his voice and his words, hey, maybe Elohim will bless us. And then we try to come home and Jews like, no, you can't do that. So This is why Joseph went into the dispersion in the first place, is because King Jeroboam took away the Torah of Elohim that was given through Moshe and replaced it with a man-made Jeroboam's Talmud. Basically, it's a replacement for the Tanach, a replacement for the written Torah. It's like, I mean, and Joseph kind of puts it in Josephite vernacular. Forgive me for the impression, but it's like, hey. And let's see what the majority of Orthodox rabbis want. Okay, you have a barf bag ready. You have a plastic receptacle to heave up into. All right, now we're just gonna read here from Orthodox Judaism's holiest book. Okay, so let's read together and you can look this up on the Sefaria website. Go to Talmud Tractate, so Sefaria, Talmud Tractate, Sanhedrin 69a, or you can just type in Sefaria, Sanhedrin 69a. So that's the front side of the 69th piece of paper in that tractate. And it says, a girl who is 3 years and 1 day old, whose father arranged for her betrothal, can be betrothed with intercourse, meaning she can get married off and they can start having relations. So it means the majority of the so-called sages in Talmud agree that the youngest you can take a wife and have marital relations is 3 years and 1 day old. And as we're going to dig further into that's not even really the limit, because as you get it, and they'll say, oh, no, you misunderstand. You have to read things in context. We're reading it in context. We're reading folios. I'm not going to read it cover to cover. Father forbid that I should. I mean, if I have to, I will, to make the point. From what we can see, and from other commentary by Jews who have left Orthodox Judaism and have started to do other things, basically, according to the Talmud, the hymen magically forms exactly at age 3. So if you happen to have marital relations with your bride before that time, there's no worry because there's no hymen to break. So according to the rabbis, there was no sex. Or it's as if there was no sex. Then we're not quoted here. We'll do the documentary, but it's like, oh, you get a poke in the eye, you have a tear, but the tear goes away. Well, hey, you know what that means. Hey. If they're younger than 3, you don't need a license. You don't need to get approved. Just, hey. And so the terrifying part is that Orthodox Judah will defend these passages. I may not be getting the interpretation exactly correctly. I want to say it in a way that they would say it. Words fail me. And Orthodox Judah doubles down on the Talmud because, hey, hubby can get started when she's only 3 years and 1 day old. Hey. So, has Mashiach ben Yosef found some 70 or 80 million Protestant American Christians who are ready to convert to the worship of the Talmud yet? It's the job for Mashiach ben Yosef to go find, 60, 70, 80 million, whether they're American Protestant Christians or maybe Poles from Christendom as a whole, but they're supposed to convert to the worship of the Talmud because that's what the Kol HaTorah, I believe, Rabbi Rivlin, it's at least 200 years old, maybe longer, maybe more. Maybe it was recycle of earlier ideas. We don't know. We're not experts on that. But what we're seeing here, and we're going to see so much evidence. Judah may stay away from our 3-year-old girls. We do not do child brides in Joseph. That apparently is a Judah and an Ishmael thing. We do not do child brides, and we will not be put off by this. We will talk about this in full detail. Hopefully we can, Father willing, we're going to have to rearrange the Parasha Midrash, what we're doing, because we need to make time for the documentary. But we need to get this out of the way here. Sad to say, but what it looks like to Joseph, after having done some extensive research and extensive reading, basically, it's like, I'm not sure. Like in Joseph, the goal is for one man and one woman to come together in the original form and fashion and form one bond for life and with love and have children then arise from that union. And from what we're taking a look at, there's extensive focus on the hymens of 3-year-old girls and what are the exceptions, like how young you can go as young as 2 years and 1 month. There's 2 witnesses to that. So, hey, the main thing is to break the maidenhead. Whoa, 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 hey, got to break that hymen. Oh, and that's why the rabbis set the minimum age at 3, is because then in places like Nida 44b, the backside of the 44th leaf, a little girl forms her hymen basically on her 3rd birthday, basically on the day she turns exactly 3. Bing! Like magic. And that is, or if that's not it, help me to understand. Help us to get it. Help us to understand, why does Talmud tractate Nida 45a say that sex with a baby before age 3 is as nothing? Because according to Talmud tractate Nida 44b, it hypothetically does not break the hymen to, say, have sex with a newborn or an infant or a child less than 3 years of age, or certainly less than 2 years and 1 month of age. And that's because the hymen magically forms at age 3, or maybe, according to divergent opinion, 2 years and 1 month, or 2 years and 30 days, if you read the whole folio. So basically, sex with a baby girl, or sex with a girl less than 3 years, or in the other opinion, 2 years and 1 month, 2 years and 30 days, is accounted as nothing. And it gets sicker than this, but this is what's easy to show in a short. Basically, well, let's just take a look. I had not looked into the Talmud that much. I mean, I'd seen quotes that I disagreed with. I've looked up like one side of a page, one folio, stuff like that. I never dug in with regard to the status of Noahides. Um, I hardly know what to say, brothers. We want to speak the truth in love. You don't make it easy here. Coming back to Nida 44b, it says, the sages taught in a Baraita, which is an entry, if a woman was acting lewdly with her minor son, and he performed the initial stage of intercourse with her, meaning like what? Penetration? Oh, now get this. So we talk about in Orthodox Judaism, you have the zugot, the area of the pairs. So you have Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai are supposed to bracket the 2 extremes that are considered acceptable. And then somewhere you have to know how to modulate. You have to know how to balance between the 2 extremes. So Beit Shammai says that he has thereby disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. So in other words, if she's sleeping with her son, she's not allowed to marry into the priesthood. Joseph would think. However, Beit Hillel deem her fit to marry into the priesthood, because Beit Hillel maintains that the intercourse of a minor is not regarded as intercourse. Okay, again, these are some light duty quotes. Wait till we get to the documentary. We can give you some full backing. And forgive me for saying, we want to be respectful, but the pedophilia hit parade goes on and on. There's man, boy, man, girl love going on. And what it looks like to Joseph, forgive me for saying so, but what it looks like is that the rabbis have made an idol out of their Yetzer Hara. They've made an idol out of their evil inclination, as found originally in the incident of Judah and Tamar, where Judah didn't pay attention to what he was doing. Judah didn't obey his promises. Judah broke his word and then said kol nidre, or whatever he did. Brothers, this is too much. Okay, and you're taking your Tamar-based legal code this Nachmanides Judah and Tamar legal code. You're trying to reestablish that as you're trying to replace out the Torah of Elohim, and you're trying to replace that as the new legal code for the whole world. And that is, well, so let's scroll down some more. As a, and you go looking for a quote, it's just kind of like, oh, mercy. You go looking for a quote, and then you're reading through the rest of the folio, and you see 3 or 4 more quotes that are at least as bad. And it's like, oh my. Yeah, and what I can't understand, like 90% of the stuff that floats out there on the internet is no good. It's like, I don't know, I can't find, or at least I can't find the reference. 90%, 85, 90%. Just go to the Zechariah website and hit these folios for yourself. And I'm sure there's many in Joseph. They won't expose their children to this at all. So I don't know where you think Mashiach ben Yosef is going to get 60, 70, 80 million fundamentalist Protestant Christians, Protestant or other, or 120 million, depends on what numbers you use. But if we keep reading in the Talmud, we will see more examples of the same pattern of older men having unlawful Tamar-like relations with basically underage girls. Pedophilia. So it says the Gemara, which is a commentary on the Mishnah for Sanhedrin 69b, tells us that Bathsheba gave birth to Solomon when she was 6, because a woman is stronger and can conceive at an earlier age. One thing Elohim forbid, and the problem here is that would mean in places like 2 Samuel 11 and verse 2, that would mean the righteous King David got excited enough by a 6-year-old girl, so he murdered her husband so he could have her. That's just how desirable she was to him. That's what Joseph is hearing. Oh, but of course, hey, with a righteous king like David, well, if David got aroused by a 6-year-old girl, well, then surely all righteous men who aspire to become like David, well, they should get aroused by 6-year-old girls too, eh? Oh, but only if they're truly righteous like King David was. Because, oh no, perish the thought. The rabbis would never advocate for child marriage. Oh no, it's written about in the Talmud left and right, but that's not, they would never actually do it. No, of course not. It's just that, righteous men like King David and Yitzhak and Avraham, they got all excited for young girls. Oh, and so according to Rashi, Avraham was the same way. So if we go to the Zechariah website and you want to type in, just look up Rashi's commentary on Bereshit or Genesis 23.1.1. So just Rashi, Genesis 23.1.1 will probably get you close. And we're talking about Haye Sarah, or the life of Sarah. So we like to do the Parasha because in the Second Temple era, Yeshua was involved in the Torah portion reading. So, but we have a Second Temple era style synagogue. Anyway, we'll talk about that. But we read here Genesis 23.1.1, Rashi's commentary on Haye Sarah. We read, so too, when Sarah was 100 years old, she was sinless. And when she was 20, she was as beautiful as when she was 7. But hey, those rabbis are teaching those 7-year-old girls, they're looking good. Woohoo, she's 7 years old. Woo, she's hot.
I hope finally Israel can stand up and say, We are the chosen people, and we were given the land of Israel. If you want to be moral and you want to be godly, let us teach you. Sit down quietly like good kids in a classroom, and we will teach you what morality means, because you have no idea.
I had to pray extra long before this recording. Is this perhaps why Judah doesn't read the Tanakh? Is this why Judah pretends the Talmud is the only possible true and correct interpretation of Tanakh? Is because they want our children? You know, as we already saw back in Genesis 37 and verse 20, Judah hates the prophets, and Judah is more than willing to kill prophets or enslave them or throw them into a pit like Judah also did with Jeremiah. Oh, and then we're going to put on a show and try to gaslight Joseph into giving up the Tanakh when the protections that Israel gave us, when Israel took us as full tribes, that's in the Tanakh. So you're like, no, the Torah, that was only given to the Jewish people, and you're gonna take the Torah, it's for the Jewish people alone. Excuse me, Joseph wasn't there. Joseph wasn't there. Okay, what portion of the whole Judah on Joseph story are we at here, brothers? We still in the denial phase? We'll talk about that when we get down to Miketz. Okay, so Judah, basically, now I wonder if you can understand how this whole thing seems to Joseph. So to get hijacked, military technology, right? Threats, been rummaging through my life. Okay, come to Israel, try to help you as best I can, and then bump into this book. Why does with all the respect, why would Judah think that Joseph would want to trade away a book that has guarantees over his identity in it? Now, again, I actually unenrolled from my PhD program before it started because I realized you have to go pursue the Spirit directly or you're never going to get there from here. But why is this what Judah wants? Why is this? Why this, brothers? Why write your whole, it's like an Encyclopedia Britannica said. Why write your whole Encyclopedia Britannica that pretends to interpret the Tanakh, but actually replaces the Tanakh with pedophilia and curses over Joseph for reading the Tanakh, for reading the Talmud? No, that's our book. Excuse me. Was Joseph there? Yeah, I think basically for Miketz, Judah's still in denial. I mean, you guys may be reading this. You probably have people who can, quote it to you verbatim. Do you know what it says? Okay, we'll do a whole chapter on the Talmud in the upcoming documentary. But one of the things that the Talmud does is it effectively changes the definitions away from the Tanakh definition. And it also forces a shift between what you might call a Tanakh spirit, someone who actually wants to keep Taryag mitzvot, all the commandments, whether you do 6, 7, 13, but whatever's found in the Pentateuch, whatever's found in the Torah Moshe, the written Torah that was given through Moshe, that's what this is what we want. This is the purpose of the dialogue, because we believe if you start, this has been our journey, we start out with the understanding we need to come back to the written Torah, then that forces an understanding that we need the Tanakh. And that's how we broke free from Esau. So then we see where it says in the Torah, you shall not add and you shall not take away. And it's like, here's like, what is this? Is just a wholesale replacement. This is Judah lifting up his Yetzer Hara like it's some serpent on a pole or something like that. One question, if that's what anyone is believing, how can Judah on Tamar, fornication, incest? Brothers, why are you cursing Joseph to death 936 times each year? I mean, it's like you can't even help but think about Pinky and the Brain, if you remember that. So I mean, according to the Talmud, Joseph is just supposed to allow himself to be gaslighted, give up all the guarantees over him that are in the Tanach and in the Torah, and all the prophecies that speak of his return as tribes of Israel, as the northern house of Israel, aka Joseph and Ephraim. And we're just supposed to take whatever Judah dishes out and be thankful. And hey, if you're going to have a kingship tribe, you got to keep the king happy. Hey, and you know how unhappy the king can get. He doesn't get to sleep with prepubescent girls, especially from the house of Joseph. Hey. But even the Talmud, the Holy Talmud shows that the righteous King David, he got excited over young girls, just like President Clinton. Hey. And Orthodox Judah is going to deny there's any problem. Orthodox Judah is going to double down. He's that proud of the work of his own hands. He's that proud of his navel gazing. And that's worth replacing the Torah that Elohim gave to Israel as a bridal covenant through Moshe. Ay. So, okay, anyway, can you see why I didn't want to do this last week? Can you see why I wanted to wait until next year? But the question was it was a great question, and I love a good study, and it's right. It's better that we deal with it. So anyway, so I do have an administrative announcement for those of you. Remember, it's a long study, but for those of you who actually care what's going on in the house of Joseph, we had to re-record last week's parasha. Thank you very much, those of you who wrote in to say that we had some typos or some slips of the tongue or whatever it was. So we did a re-recording. Not a re-recording. We patched a couple of mistakes and uploaded. If anyone notices any more mistakes, any more errors, please let us know. That's very important to us. We are not, you see, well, both, I guess Judah also, you see both Judah and Joseph. I see the ministers, so-called Ephraimite ministers, and they're really just about selling a bunch of books, raising a bunch of money. Judah's no different. Orthodox Judah's no different. It's just like a free-for-all. It is not what it says in the Levitical order. There are rules for what you're supposed to do in the renewed covenant, and we're the only ministry I know of that's keeping those rules. Let's just leave it there. But to us, it's not about us being right. It's about us together learning and dialoguing about what is right so that eventually we can come to an agreement and form the Genesis 35 Alliance. If anyone in the Southern House reads Genesis 35. Sorry, that's how I feel about it. Because if, Elohim is right, Elohim is the righteous one. Elohim is the one that gives us our marching orders. It's not for a Gadite to school Judah and Levi, but apparently it is. So anyway, if anyone has any comments, we did have to re-upload. We had to fix a couple of small errors and some things, and then I'm not sure how many, but then we re-uploaded, and I guess there were some comments there. We were going to answer those, and then I guess those got deleted at the time of the re-upload. So if you made comments before the re-upload, please make them again. We want to receive your respectful comments from both houses. It needs to be respectful. We don't have time. We're out of time. Short on staff, so we're burning the candle at both ends. We can't maintain this. I'm not sure what we'll do next week. Hopefully, probably a lot shorter parasha, because we need to make progress on the long videos. But if we're doing more, basically, I'm going to take my notes, my study notes, and throw them at you this week because of the question that came up. So anyway, please make your constructive comments again. But to speak the truth in love, there were a few special comments. There was one comment that I didn't get to see. He was from an Israeli man who I didn't see the message. I'm not sure if he said he worked with the prime minister or he knows the prime minister. But anyway, he said that basically he said The prime minister is not going to have time for this, so we should just stop because we're wrong and he's right, and so we should just stop. And what I'm told is that the comment didn't seem respectful, so it was deleted according to my instructions because we just don't have time. If it's respectful, hopefully we can read and respond or read and post or whatever. If it's not respectful and you don't really care what happens to the house of Joseph, save yourself some time because it won't get read. It'll just get deleted. But to respond, basically it was like, why are you doing this? Justify your reasons for this kind of a parasha. And I guess that was really, really, really good question. So my response would be, if you're watching this time and you happen to know the prime minister, I can understand that he's very busy and doesn't have time to watch everything himself. I don't have time to watch everything myself. I have instructions, and if something special comes in, we have a special routine for that. But if the prime minister has time to approve the hijacking of my computer back in 57, 77, and I understand from special forces training that when you're doing something like this, you need plausible deniability. I understand that, but everyone saw me, and why else did I come to Israel to take death threats from the Sanhedrin at my own expense? And no matter whether it was the Mossad or Unit 8200 or whoever it is that did the actual hijacking, you have to get approval. At least I was told from someone who should know that you have to gain approval from the prime minister's office, because you have to have the prime minister's approval to hijack an American foreign national's computer. So, and the thing I think that's the biggest insult from that whole thing is that basically my life was hijacked 7 years ago. And I'm glad that you look for the positive, look for the good. We're able now to speak more accurately to Judah's codification of the Judah and Tamar cycle. But, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know quite what to say. Ordinarily, we don't like to be quite this raw in the presentation, but we just don't have time. So I'm just speaking to you from the heart about these certain subjects. These are my study notes from the week. But, so it's okay to hijack my computer. It's okay to hijack my life. But no one answers my correspondence. No one answers emails. No one answers texts or entries on submission, nothing like that. So, we understand plausible denial. We get it. We understand it's the black ops horse. We get it. But if Black Horse Judah thinks that White Horse Joseph is going to go away quietly while Judah is cursing Joseph, like everyone, all the people I know, you're cursing everyone I know in Joseph. And but everyone I know in Joseph, you're cursing him. And there's good people lost in Asaph. That's one of the things we hope to cover in the documentary. There's lots of good people still in Asaph. So let's keep moving forward. So if Judah thinks that Joseph is going to sit quietly and watch his coat and the prophecies and his identity be stolen from him again, just like you stripped Joseph of his tribal identity in his coat, his ketona besim in ancient times, then, the prime minister doesn't need to watch this, but I happen to know that we are monitored. And it's been every war there's ever been. The prime ministers have always consulted with the rabbis. Why? Of course, we know why. So, again, we'll talk about this more in the second chapter of the video series. But if Judah thinks that Joseph is indistinguishable from Asaph to the point that you can just curse all of us, just break Genesis 12 and verse 3 with impunity, then you need to think again. So if you know the prime minister and you know he's busy, maybe you can take some good notes for him. Maybe you can explain it to him in shorthand. He can understand that Joseph looks at the Bible as something more than a trivia document. We don't just read the Tanach so we can win trivia contests. No, we read the Tanakh as a living document. That's the difference between, there's Ephraim, Manasseh, and Asaph. So Ephraim at least reads it, hypothetically at least, as a living document. Joseph prays that Judah also will learn or relearn to treat the Tanakh as a living document, because is it a small thing to blow off the commandments of Elohim as recorded in the Tanakh? That's what Judah's doing. And I hate to disappoint the good prime minister, but if he thinks that he gets to hijack my life and then next, what am I supposed to do with that? Just live with the knowledge that Judah is cursing us 3 times each weekday and not supposed to do or say anything about it. Oh, and by the way, for the record, I've never felt better. If there's a suicide, it wasn't me. So here we have Judah. This is last week we saw the Judah on Joseph violence in Vayeshev, and here we have a separate theme. We have the Judah on Tamar. Respectfully, we have Judah on Tamar theme. So this is not, so we have a Judah on Joseph violence cycle, and this is not a Judah on Tamar sexual immorality cycle or sexual predator cycle. And Joseph is just supposed to sit down and say nothing. Right. We just need to get things clear. The command is to make friends with Brother Judah. The command is not to be gaslit by Brother Judah. And if Judah thinks that Brother Joseph is going to sit idly by and wait for his pedophile priests to gaslight Joseph into submission to his codified, idealized Yetzer Hara, then we would kindly encourage the prime minister to think again. Because what Joseph is realizing now is that there is a continuing state of undeclared Vayeshev warfare that has been declared by Judah on Joseph. And as we will see in the documentary Bible study, it has been since the days of Vayeshev. Drop your Nachmanides marker there. So if the prime minister has no time, if you could please take some good notes for him, does the good prime minister perhaps have time to consider what it will mean for himself and his people if his rabbis, his rabbinical order, we've seen him binding tefillin this last week, does the good prime minister perhaps have time to consider what it will mean for himself and his family and his people if the Orthodox Sanhedrin knows who Joseph is enough to hijack my computer, and yet still Joseph is to be cursed 3 times each weekday, 18 times a week, 936 times a year, and not just Joseph, but also those Jews who sojourn with the house of Joseph, because there's plenty of them. We'll cover that in the chapter on the chronology. So Elohim gives commandments over Abraham's seed in Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3. And there are other injunctions in places like Deuteronomy or Devarim chapter 4 and verse 2. Maybe Rabbi Weiss has heard of them. Never, ever, ever to change Elohim's Torah. Because if we change his Torah, it's no longer his Torah. It's ours. We don't get to make our own marital covenant. That's not how it works. Elohim is the provider. Elohim has the man's role. We're in a spiritual bride role. He's offering. We're either taking or not. We don't get to change it. We don't get to cut, but we can try to cut deals with Elohim. It doesn't work like that. The best thing to do is just to give it up and submit and hand him your steering wheel and be glad. So did Elohim, forgive me, did he give the house of Judah a pass or excuse Judah to get out of Genesis 12 and verse 3? Is there something written in the Talmud perhaps somewhere that, oh yeah, well, we can kind of know who Joseph really is, but we don't have to be straight about it? No, because everything's in secret. Everything's covert ops. Okay, black horse, we get it. covert ops horse, we get it. But like the rabbis outnumber Elohim, and so your court is greater than numerical strength than his. So because you have a numerical court with more strength than his, I mean, I don't even know. It's like, how do you arrive at the conclusion? It's like it's like Korah's rebellion again. You take too much on yourselves, Tanach. You take too much on yourselves, written Torah and the voice of Elohim. You take too much on yourselves, voice of Elohim and the written Torah. You take too much on yourselves, the voice of Elohim and the written Tanakh. No, we have to replace all that with the Talmud. We have our own Tachanot and Maasim. We have our own enactments and decrees, right? It's like, why? Why, brothers? It's like, forgive us, but why is Joseph being expected? I mean, it's like you've taken your sickest fantasies from the Judah on Tamar cycle. You've made this idealized body of literature out there, and all this commentary, like almost 2,000 years of commentary. And this is going to be the agenda for the rest of the world?
מה שהוא עוד, וגם מצו שעדיין משיח ליבו. אז הייתה מה שהוא במה ידיעתו. אתם יודעים שהיא מספיק, כי היום כבר שוד כמה שוד בנוי ועדיין ליבו. אבל יש עוד כמה שעות, אז יש משרדים גם היום.
Now we need to ask the distinguished and accomplished prime minister, in the context of Nachmanides and cycles theory, what else could the prime minister be talking about except advancing the Talmudic plan for world domination, which you also apparently, according to circumstantial evidence at least, are working on? And there's some principle in law, I should have looked it up. There's some principle in law that if the circumstantial evidence points to the most simplest theory, then there's some principle in law about that. So our question is, why does this Talmudic plan include slaughtering Joseph? Because that's what we see in the Birchat Haminim. So, and we talk about cycles theory. What do we do with Amos chapter 2 and verse 4, Mr. Prime Minister? If Amos chapter 2 and verse 4 indicates that Judah is not following Elohim, or at least he was not following Elohim, and things tend to follow patterns and cycles, rather it seems to indicate that, you know, in all love, in all respect, I'll tell you all the problems with Ephraim. We'll give you a scorecard so you can figure them out. But what do we do with it? Is this why you don't want us reading the Tanakh? Is this why you guys don't read the Tanakh? It says that you're following lies that your ancestors followed. So in context, are we talking about Judah on Tamar here? And then the lines of Zerah and Peretz? Or what is actually being said here, Mr. Prime Minister? And in the context of Nachmanides' cycles theory, why is Judah getting ready to do it again? With all the respect and in all love, the good prime minister has time for Bible trivia contests. Yes. And the prime minister doesn't have time to find out how his people are putting the branch to Elohim's nose. So whoever is keeping tabs on us, whoever is informing the prime minister, would the good prime minister like to put the Bible to a test that's somewhat more than trivial? Or is Amos 2 and verse 4 not trivial enough for you? Hijacking my life and slamming the door in my face when I came to talk about how to bring the lost tribes of Joseph home, and you contacted me. That's too trivial. We're not interested in doing a Tanakh study on that. I was so ready to just be blown away by the Tanakh knowledge. of Brother Judah, and you guys you don't even read it. Your elite rabbis don't like, oh wow, what a hard thing to read the Tanakh. So, Mr. Prime Minister, when you're taking advice from the rabbis, my advice would be find one who at least has read the Tanakh more than once. So you can do what you want. You're the Prime Minister of the Southern House. So, but we are here to tell you in this video, or whoever's reporting the Prime Minister, we are not willing to give up the Tanakh. And after the more we learn about Talmud, the more staunch you will not get us to trade Tanakh for Talmud. You will not. And the Noahide law thing is just an insult. So I'll tell you the whole story, but first it was slam the door in my face. And then after a couple weeks, hey, maybe he'd like to be a slave. So here I am looking over my shoulder for the next 6 weeks until my plane leaves. No explanation, no apology, nothing. Next. Yeah, I mean, Joseph's question, not that you've asked because you haven't, but that's preaching. You tell them even though they don't ask. Why does Judah want to read pedophilia when you could read the Tanakh instead? Did you pick up some social disease in Chaldea, perhaps? And this is just too weird for Joseph. So we're talking about people who are promoting sexual deviancy in their own writings and then pretending like it's the rest of the world that has the problem, which, just to say it, is not a diagnosis, but that's classic narcissist behavior, only just happening on a mafia-like corporate scale. And you have a small minority, basically 10, 13% of the population, that curses all the rest of Judaism, including and especially the Nazarene. There's never been any apology for this. There's no monument whatever to the death of Yeshua. It's not taught in Israeli history. Mr. Prime Minister, why is this legal? Okay, we're playing by the rules of Babylonian democracy. That's where it began. And it's clearly illegal according to the, how should we say, according to the precepts, the concepts of Babylonian democracy. Even if you leave that aside, we understand the Haredim don't respect state governments. Do the Haredim respect Genesis 12 and verse 3? And if the good Prime Minister knows that we are the house of Joseph enough to hijack my computer, and there's no apology, oh, sorry, didn't work out. Forget it. Go back to sleep. Next. I can understand the good Prime Minister would be busy, so if someone can please summarize for him. We are very concerned for the house of Judah. The more we take a look, the more we read the prophecies in the Tanakh, which is how we do. We go cover to cover. The more we are concerned for, the more we realize it is written in the Talmud, the more concerned we are for Brother Judah having added and subtracted so much. It's more than just adding and subtracting. It's wholesale substitution. And we know from Amos 2 and verse 4 that that's a later pattern marker of an earlier pattern. So if there was some corruption that took place earlier than Jeremiah, there's some corruption that took place earlier than Amos, where's the earliest corruption we can find? And we find it in Parasha Vayeshev, brothers. Okay, so now we want to hit the high points of Parasha Miketz. So I was going to do something else after I got the Tamar question and we had an opportunity to discuss it and research it. And then I hit the Talmud. It's like, okay, hold up. So we rearranged. I was going to do this next year before we read the Talmud. And after receiving the question and then doing a little digging, doing a little research, I realized we should just go ahead and change the Haftarah and the Brit Chadasha portions. And what we hope is, our prayer is that this will help to illustrate the differences between what the written Torah that was given to Israel as a bridal covenant through Moshe as the agent of delivery, what what the Tanach of Elohim call for on the one hand versus what the Judah on Joseph violence cycle and the Judah on Tamar illicit seed and illicit, well, nothing wrong with breaking through. That's one of the things that makes Judah great. But brothers, if Joseph were to take the works of the church fathers and to use them to replace the renewed covenant, or if Joseph were to like make, which they kind of do in a certain sense, but that's Mystery Babylon for you. So we'll talk about that more in the Abraham Accords series. Yeah, no, Trinitarianism, that's Mystery Babylon. We'll talk about that later. But I mean, if there's a replacement of Elohim's words, you're more than willing to call it out on the Christian side. Yeah, and replacement theology is replacement theology, and Trinitarianism is replacement theology, no question. It ultimately boils back to Esau, what we call the pink horse, so to speak, because it's Joseph, he's tainted. Anyway, moving on. The Talmud is like, it's a replacement of Elohim's words. So we only came out of Esau by focusing on Esau's words. So the cry was sola scriptura, meaning only scripture, basically only Tanach plus Brit Chadasha for us. But what that means is if it doesn't match the face value of Elohim's words, and you can't reconcile it to the face value of Elohim's words, this is apart from hearing. This is reading and doing what's written with the right spirit, not twisting it, taking it out of context. If there's a commandment of men, the Esau also has had a going thing now for almost 2,000 years. So theirs is a little, well, that's a whole separate, we'll talk about that in the Abraham Accords. But it took us focusing on the Tanakh to break free from Esau. Esau had his Talmud, and we didn't want to obey it. We wanted to obey the Tanakh. And so now it's 10 Jubilee cycles after was when I came to Israel in 5777 or 2017. That's 500 years after the Protestant Reformation, 5278 or 1517. We'll talk about that in the Abraham Accords series. But so it took us, well, first we left, but we'll talk about that later. But brothers, the relationships are built on trust. And if you guys believe in the Tanakh at all, then we have a lot to talk about. I came to Israel during the second half of the Second Intifada until I was kicked out, basically, for not converting to Orthodox Judaism. And I asked everyone, I mean, I don't know how many rabbis, I don't, just all kind of, and no one knew anything about Joseph. No one knew anything about Ephraim. Oh no, see the B'nai Noach people, or see the anti-Yeshua people. And then I get my computer hijacked over it like 11 years later, 12 years later. We're just asking you, if you know that we're your brothers, why are you cursing us? Why is there a curse, a death curse, that you say as part of your liturgy? And, Judah's not going to spend effort if he doesn't think it's important, right? So what we want to do here in Miketz is we want to hit the high points, basically, and we'll set up for Vayigash and Vayehi, because there's more to say, which is why we took this extra detail on last week's Torah portion. So in Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 41 and verse 45, and please forgive me if I don't, we're still learning everything here. It's just a question of time. Paro, or Pharaoh, called Yosef's name Zaphnath Paneah, and he gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the pagan priest of On. Okay, now we have basically two bombshells here. If you want to talk about two houses, if you want to talk about a future identity crisis for the house of Joseph, let's talk about getting sold into slavery by your own brothers. Okay, and it's the Egyptians, they're the ones that honor you. So, I mean, we don't have any idea what's going on through Joseph's mind. We can just imagine ourselves in his shoes and what would he be going through from a Hebraic context. His own brothers stole his identity, stole his coat, threw him in a pit, decided, oh no, it's better for us if we sell him than kill him. And now here you're being honored as second command of all of Egypt. And now you're given a pagan high priest's daughter to wife. Let's talk Genesis 1 and verse 11. Okay, now I don't want to say, I'm still debating with myself whether we want to make it an official policy that so to speak, that Judah basically established two new species here, Ephraim and Manasseh, because we were crossed with Egyptian pagan priestly stock. So here you have basically someone who is, at least spiritually, in spiritual terms, we don't concern ourselves that much with race. It explains certain things historically, explains certain patterns and histories, but the children of Israel went all over everywhere. So it's every family, every nation, every clan. But now we have a new thing on the earth. We have two half-breed children. We have two half Hebrews, two half Egyptian. Egypt is symbolic of the world, and priestly stock. So is it any wonder that we end up with Manasseh, who doesn't want? He's forgotten his home. He's forgotten his father's house. Just Mendel's peas, for those of you who studied that. We talked the other day about how John Hulley, again, I'm carbon dating myself. John Hulley's talking with the rabbis or whoever it is down at the wall, and he's like, so what? We never liked Ephraim anyway. And it's true. That's exactly the truth. So, and we believe that is why Israel took us for full tribes, is because he knew if he didn't do that, you would cut us out. And to us, it's baffling. We can understand jealousy at being given the Pasim. We can understand being upset that Father Israel had us in training. We get all that. And we're sorry. We didn't do anything, though. That's the thing we need you to understand. So, yes, we're guilty of saving your lives by a great deliverance, or being used because Elohim's the one who did it. But you hate us for being used to save your lives by a great deliverance? And where are the patterns here? Taking the coat, taking the Ketona Pasim, stealing Joseph's identity. Yahweh have mercy. It's hard to know what to say, brothers. It's hard to treat this kind of abuse with the knowledge. These are patterns, and they repeat themselves, and we see the windup. We're getting ready for the pitch. And Paro called Yosef's name Zaphnath Paneah. And so just to dig into that a little bit, the Christian side has a little bit, not that much. It's Strong's Hebrew 6847, Zaphnath Paneah. My pronunciation is not perfect. It says that it is I would love to get more time. It says it is of Egyptian derivation. So I hope that's at least close, but yeah, leave that. And it is one entry under Strong's, even though it's two words. So Safnath, Sadi Pe Nun Sa, Sadi Pe Nun Tav. So that's related to north. Paneach, to me, it's related to faces. Pe Ayin Nun Chet. Strong's just says it's Joseph's Egyptian name. So it's not that much information on the Christian side. Ironically, Brown Driver Briggs suggests it means treasury of the glorious rest. And yeah, if we had more time, we could. What happened? Oh, Spike, welcome to the third world. We're trying to put the suction on Asav's gas tank. Power's not always consistent. Internet's not always consistent. Anyway, power of the glorious rest. We could talk about how that turns into, we'll come back to that. Hopefully we'll come back to that. We go into it some other time. Logos says simply that the precise derivation and meaning of the name is unknown. Okay. However, we go to Wikipedia. Brother Judah has several ideas. We agree with all of them, probably because their ideas are derived from the Hebrew text, from the words themselves. So it makes more sense, Brother Judah, have much better insights into the intended meanings of the authors. So scroll down to the interpretations section. It tells us that Targum Onkelos's take, is around the 1st century CE, gives the meaning as the name, it's the man to whom hidden things are revealed. So for Christians, Targum is basically someone's take. It's like a new international version rewrite according to whatever he wanted. It's not the original. It's acknowledged it's not the original, but that's what he comes up with from that. Yeah. Targum pseudo Jonathan, the man who revealeth mysteries. Yes. Josephus says a finder of mysteries. Yes. Rashi says explainer of hidden things. Yes. They're going from the Hebrew and they're trying to put it into their language, their lingua franca, whatever they're using. Nachmanides gives explainer of secrets. Yes. These are all pretty much the same meanings, and we agree. We'll talk about it in a minute. Let's continue for the moment. So the reason for these translations is that the feminine noun safnat, safnat refers to something hidden or secret in Hebrew, deriving from the root. I'm looking at that without vowel points. I would just say saphon, which means north. So showing, I can read it better than I can say it. So just without vowel points. Okay, so it says the root meaning to hide or to conceal. We'll talk about how the north and how the hidden is related in just a moment. So the Chinese, anyway. So meanwhile, paneach is a verb deriving from the root. I'll try my best. Pa'anach. So, and it means to discover or decipher or decode. Yeah, I can see that. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So this will give us the general translation of Zafnath Paneah from the Hebrew as he who deciphered the hidden. And we also agree with that. So these are, Hebrew word-based translations. So back before I got called to study the Bible, I was looking for truth in all the wrong places because they trained me against the Bible in public schools. So I was at one point after the military, I was looking for truth. And of course, I looked in all the wrong places because I didn't think, they taught me against Scripture. So I was at one point, along with looking into psychology, I was looking into a doctorate in Chinese medical theory. So I don't know Egyptian. One moment. And I don't know if the editor will have time to put this up, but probably not. Seems like Safun sounds like north, just to my, I'm not fluent yet here. And Paneach, to me, I'm not a philologist, but that sounds like Panim. So Misrad Hapanim, Ministry of the Interior, Ministry of the Faces. It's very interesting. And then you have your like fillings and the pastries, like they're bifnim, they're in the faces, they're in the interior faces. So interesting concept. I'm still learning Hebrew, still studying Hebrew. But basically, if I was just to guess at that without vowel points, without anything, I would just say that which is concealed in the interior faces. So Panim, Misrad Hapanim is the ministry of the interior faces. It's just my Targum Norman. But so what we're speaking of is someone who knows about the things that are hidden on the inside, because you have the Misrad Hapanim, is the government ministry of the faces that are inside. So the stuffing in the pastries, so to speak. And in Chinese medical thought, China is also north of the equator. So similar to Israel, the sunny side of the hill is the south side of the hill, whereas the north side of the hill, on the other hand, is the shady side of the hill. So what happens is that the south side is the place of reporting because the south side is exposed. That's where you go. The things are now seen in the light of day. And then what happens on the north side gets concealed because that's where the shadows are. So we're going to see in the chronology section of the documentary, we're going to show how Ephraim left out to the north, both in the physical direction and also the spiritual direction in Chinese thought, I believe also in Israel, in Hebrew thought, you have like there's two. You have Kedem and Mizrach, they mean different things. You have Neged, I forget the other word. So yeah, there's two different directions for north and this kind of thing also. So we'll talk about all those some other time. We have more time and more space. But in the Haftarah, so in the Torah portion, we're just told that Joseph is Zaphanath Paneah, so he's the one who knows. He's the revealer of secrets. Why? Is because he's able to see what's going on in the interior faces, because he can see the things that are hidden. I don't know, was he autistic? No idea. He was a full-on prophet. He wasn't just autistic. He was a full-on prophet. And in the Haftarah, we're going to see that Ephraim gets called back from the north, or from that area which is hidden. And that's also, we'll talk about the Sambachan River in the Abraham Accords series. So for Christians, especially Westerners, again, they got two norths. Okay, you have a physical north, like you get at your map and compass, and then then Israel will get attacked from out of the north. This kind of a thing. And then you also have a spiritual north, and it's like multi-generational, kind of like a zera north, zera level. So it's more of a hidden, more of a concealed north. And I'm sure if I would love to talk to someone from Judah that knows the more technical terms from the Hebrew side, but and for those who do a Passover Seder, just for example, you also have an Afikomen. So that's, and then the hidden Afikomen is called a Tsafun, meaning hidden. So Tsafun means hidden. It also means north. And then it says it derives from the Ugaritic, or the hidden or dark region. And that's like in the Chinese concept, being the shady side of a hill, or like if you're a climber, the north face, so to speak, is always colder, icier. It's concealed too. It doesn't get as much sunshine. So that's the Hebrew meaning of concealed. And also it says in a related Semitic tongue, Arabic, so they're Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic, Damara literally means hidden, and metaphorically, conscience. Interesting. And we know that Joseph always acted according to his conscience. And at least in that sense, Baba Batra 12b, I believe, it sounds similar to autism, because you're not able to operate. Neuronormal people, I believe, are able to make up lies and live according to lies a lot better than autistic people, because you just don't have the same, you have different equipment. So different blessings, different pluses and minuses. And so in the Haftarah, we're going to see that Ephraim, or Joseph, left out to the north. And we'll talk all about that in the Abraham Accords series. We'll also see Ephraim come back from the north in the Abraham Accords video series, also here in this parasha. Let's go to Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah, chapter 3 and verse 12. Yahweh says, "Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, return, backsliding Israel, says Yahweh. I need to drink, I'm thirsty. I will not cause my anger to fall on you, for I am merciful, says Yahweh. I will not remain angry forever." Verse 13, just acknowledge your iniquity, Ephraim, not doing his words. If you're sitting and reading, are you doing it like Judah does it? Matthew 5 and verse 20, he said, acknowledge your iniquity that you followed Jeroboam's Talmud. You didn't follow my voice. You weren't even seeking my voice, and you sure weren't listening to what the prophets were writing down. You weren't keeping my written Torah that was delivered as a ketubah through my servant Moshe. And he says, and you have not obeyed my voice, says Yahweh. That's the main thing. That's the first thing he told the firstborn priesthood. And we don't obey his written commandment either, do we? So in the chronology section of the documentary Bible study, the chronology section will be key. So in the chronology section of the documentary Bible study, we're going to show how much of Judah also went into the dispersion right along with Joseph. And then in verse 18, the USA falls, basically, and the house of Israel or Ephraim or Joseph, basically Mystery Babylon, falls prior to the second Exodus, which is so great. We'll forget all about the first Exodus. So this is when both Joseph and Judah, who sojourns with Joseph in the dispersion, will come back to the land of Israel. And what's so important about this, as we saw in last week's study, is that the Tanach prophecies, the prophets of Elohim, tell us that we will not come back as Noahide slaves. Rather, we will come back as brothers. And Joseph really does not understand why Judah doesn't want to read the Tanakh. And Joseph can really only think, I don't know any other way to say it, brothers. Like, what other possible explanation can there be for telling Joseph not to read the Tanakh prophecies unless you're trying to hide something from us? These are the oracles of Elohim. We were always supposed to read them. That's what it was in the synagogues in the Second Temple era. You had the synagogue and everyone came. It wasn't they weren't trying to make it into a mini temple in the Second Temple era. They tried to turn it into a mini temple after Yavne, after the destruction of the Second Temple. That's when the synagogue was transformed into a mini temple. But at least according to our understanding, studies we've read, in the Second Temple era, it was much more like a study hall. You would go there together. The speaker would stand in the middle of the room, and he would have to be able to respond to questions about the Tanakh. That all changed, of course, after Yavne. But originally, before Yavne, before the destruction of the Second Temple, back when that man came to fulfill Daniel 9:25 and 9:26, originally you had the speaker was in the middle of the room. So, brothers, forgive me, but what are the nations going to say? What are the nations going to say when his people don't even know his own words? Oh, and they're going to cry out, "Save us!" And it's like, Proverbs 8, Mishlei 8. It's like, if you listen to him, if you listen for his voice, he will save you. Or she, Ruach is a feminine. But if you're not listening for his voice, and you're not listening to someone who is hearing the voice, but you're hearing your buddies from Babylon. Okay, this is a big problem, brothers. Now, we're told in Mishlei or Proverbs 26 and verse 27, if you dig a pit for someone, and this is no matter whether you're Joseph or Judah or who, everyone knows for each and every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. This applies both to Judah and to Joseph. This was before, so Solomon, at least if this part was written during Solomon's reign, this again, we were still there. The breakup didn't happen until after Solomon. But it's, if you're going to dig a pit for Joseph, how are you going to keep from falling into it, brothers? So, are you trying to roll away the stone of stumbling and the rock of offense? It's not going to roll right back on top of you. Father forbid, brothers, the reason for this is because Elohim said so, but I can see why. And I understand why you want a Christian to come straighten you out, to be your Gentile Christian Messiah. I get it. But some things just cannot happen. And a word to the wise should be sufficient. I, as whether you want to call me an Ephraimite, a Josephite, a Gadite, whatever you want, I as an Ephraimite, or I as a Josephite, or I as a Gadite should not have to make videos for the prime minister, the Knesset, and the Sanhedrin to alert them to the difference between what's written in the Tanakh and what's written in the Talmud. My understanding of the Levitical order, your calling, your marching orders, you guys are supposed to be teaching us what the Tanakh says. And you say, no, that's what the Talmud is. The Talmud is the only legitimate interpretation of the Tanakh. And if you Gentiles, you goyim, we don't even get called gerim. Yeah, and I asked that too. And in the second half, like I asked about Ger Toshav, I asked about Ger Tzaddik. Nothing like that. That's old. That's the old program. Out with the old, in with the new, in with the replacement theology. Joseph can't do this. Our commandment will show in Deuteronomy 30, 1 through 10, I believe. Don't quote me on that. 1 through 8, 1 through 10. Which one do I want to quote? But it says that when we come back to his voice and his commandments, that's when we get to come home. And here's Judah. Sorry, brother. Or not brother, excuse me. Sorry, Goyim. Okay, well, moving on. If we go to Zechariah chapter 6, just right away, starting in verse 1, we have the horses appearing again. So verse 2, we see red horses, and we're going to do Father willing, we'll do a 4 horses video set, and we'll see that this is Esav. And the reason Esav is red is because he's mad. He's always mad. So just for example, you have your Roman cardinals all dressed in red and this kind of a thing. So red is pretty much their color, although they do claim white. There's the same kind of a replacement thing. They claim to be in their symbology the white horse also, but they're red. And we'll talk about the pink horse in some other place. We talked about Ephraim and Manasseh. Yeah, there's more to do. Okay, so in verse 2, the second chariot has black horses. Now, this is the kingship tribe, Judah. Okay, the kingship, it's the Black Ops tribe. Now, again, in context, we're talking about Tamar, the Mossad, and sexpionage. So, verse 3, the white horses are Joseph, and the dappled horses are Ishmael. And we'll see Ishmael change from dappled in the Tanakh into green. Some say gray, but it's chloros. It's green in the renewed covenant. Basically, and that's a foreshadow of what will happen after Muhammad would come. We don't have time to unpack that here. Hopefully we can get into that in the Abraham Accords video series. In verse 5, though, notice the Malach or angel says that these are 4 spirits of heaven who go out from their station before the Adon of all the earth. Okay, and here we go. Verse 6, the one with the black horses, Judah, Black Ops horse, he's going to the north country, and the white horses, Joseph, are going after them. And now, notice the order there. Black goes first instead of white. That was a surprise to me. We'll talk about that a lot later. But then and it says, and then the dappled, later green, are going toward the south country, which is where the Muslims, cousin Ishmael, they went south first. And they used green for their color after, I forget the date exactly, 600 and something. Should know that. And we don't have time to unpack the migrations of the tribes here, but we want to notice something special in verse 6. And then we're going to come back to it again later in the 4 horses series, which is probably quite a ways off. But black leads white, and that's the correct order. And that's something I think most of Joseph has no clue, no idea. We talk about this a little bit in the Revelation series, and then Father willing, we'll do a lot more coming up in the 4 horses series. But you have your Genesis 35 alliance right there, because you have black horses. So take a look at Genesis 35 and verse 11, and then you have a nation, a great nation, which is Judah, the kingship tribe, and then you have a company of Christian nations, Josephite Christian nations. And that's what it is. So that is your Genesis 35 alliance right there. Okay, well, where did they go? Okay, we'll talk about this in the Abraham Accords series. They went north into what later became Protestant Christian Europe, and also not just Protestant, also Orthodox and Catholic. At least at first it was Catholic, and then there was a division. We'll talk about all that. There's a lot of history going on there. But they went north into Christian Europe, and it's very interesting that Judah, kingship tribe, leads the way again. So that helps. We really have just a communication issue. And then going back to the Tanakh issue, it's basically what remains to be done. So they went north, black horse leading, white horse following, into Yephthite country together. And we'll talk about the prophecies over Japheth and Shem in the Abraham Accords series. But Joseph just finds it fascinating that Judah leads here. And just for Joseph, spend a little time praying and thinking. Judah leads here. So things that we see with government agencies, this kind of a thing. Some people even think Christopher Columbus was Jewish, maybe seeking a way out of danger, this kind of a thing. So some people also think that Judah found a way to take charge of the Roman Empire and ride the Babylonian system long before the Sabbatean Frankists, the Dunme, and the Jesuits. Daniel 7 and verse 7. So some people think that kind of thing started all the way back in the book of Esther, and that's parrots breaking through. And the Dunme and the Jesuits, those generational undercover agents, that's Zerah. They're not in charge, so parrots is in charge. Zerah is not in charge, but notice it's a big time assist. They're still secretly, covertly Jewish. And they're helping to fulfill Genesis 49 and verse 8. That's something Joseph shouldn't miss. The only thing we would say considered to the house of Judah is we are very concerned for you. We do not believe that you can win the final phase of a covert war unless you go above board, meaning going back to the Tanach, and in particular, going back to the Levitical order, not the rabbinical, but the Levitical. We'll talk about that in a lot more detail in the chapter on the Talmud. And the reason we say that is because we love you, we care about you, and we want you to succeed and not fail. Our own success depends upon a successful kingship tribe. But before we can even talk about that kind of a thing, first, Judah will need to go back to obeying Elohim. Because right now you're not, brothers. And we want to be respectful about that. But right now you're not obeying Elohim. You're obeying yourselves and your own. It's a Tamar. It's a Judah on Tamar vision, brothers. And then finally, in Luke chapter 4 and verse 18, this is something Josephites need to pay attention to this too. Yeshua is saying that he came to bring home Joseph. That's what he's saying here. And as we'll see in the Abraham Accords series, that's what he said. He came to bring home Joseph or Ephraim. And as we saw last week, Judah hates that. Judah hates prophets. And that's why Joseph got the welcoming committee from Sheol that he did. For another remez or for another hint, Yohanan or John 11 and verse 54 tells us that Yeshua therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but he went into the country near the wilderness to a city called Ephraim, and there remained with his disciples. So I once had an Orthodox rabbi. He told me it's well known in the Orthodox community that in the end of days, the Christians and the Jews will be pushed closer and closer together. That's what we call Team Black-White, or the Genesis 35 Alliance, or you could call it the industrial military complex, because the Jews, they're in charge of all the corporations. Ephraim, there's your battle axe and weapons of war. So we think the Genesis 35:11 alliance is the best idea yet, because it comes right from Elohim. He says that's what we're supposed to be doing. Why are we teaching anyone ever anything against that? Joseph does not understand. And, what does it mean that Yeshua went and had to hide out in a city called Ephraim? Because he couldn't no longer walk openly among the Jews. For that matter, why am I? And never mind. So Yohanan or John chapter 7 and verse 35 tells us that the pre-Talmudic leadership said amongst themselves, with the same spirit, they said amongst themselves, where does Yeshua intend to go that we shall not find him? Does he perhaps intend to go out to the dispersion, in the Assyrian diaspora, among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? And then the answer to that is yes. Does he intend to go teach the Hellenistic Jews, kind of like the Reformed Jews of today? Conservative? Yes. And that, they believe, is why the renewed covenant was originally written in Greek, and why they used the Septuagint as a base for it, is because it was intended primarily for an audience in the dispersion. There were two purposes, one of which was to bring back the lost Josephite and Abrahamic sparks that had been lost during the Assyrian diaspora, and also Jews that never came back from Babylon. So yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was about. So if I was to try to put it in Kabbalistic terminology, just to try to word it, forgive me if I make any errors, but a Josephite trying to talk Kabbalah when he hasn't really read it, he's read about it. So basically, you have 12 Jewish heroes who effectively threw themselves at the base of Esau's ladder in what we would think of as the greatest generational hostage rescue operation of all time. And their Talmudic brothers hated them too and sought to kill them too. Basically, can't prove this, but we already know that Judah doesn't want Joseph to come home. We already know that Judah doesn't want Joseph to resume his identity with his Ketone Pasim. So why would you not kill the hostage rescue team? Why would you not kill the leader of the hostage rescue sect? So, like it or not, brothers, we'll have to talk about this more in the documentary. Ephraim, just in case anyone was wondering, Ephraim separated from Esau in 5278 in the Protestant Reformation. And that was the end of our 1,260 years in bondage, effectively to the papal Talmud. And that's what is described in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. And we don't like to admit it, especially not to ourselves, but Joseph actually owes Esau at least somewhat of a debt of gratitude for at least bringing us into the Bible. So Esau brought Joseph in, he brought us in at the point of the sword, but at least they did teach us to read the Bible. And so with this, we agree with Rabbi Breitowitz. Yes, Mashiach ben Yosef from 5776 and 5777 agrees that is exactly what happened. And that was exactly the point. That was exactly the purpose of our spending time in captivity inside of Esau for 1,260 years, a time, times, and half a time. If you want to know the details on that, we cover that in the Nazarene Israel study. And in 5278, Joseph basically graduated to the next stage of his refinement, which was that of Protestantism. So we left Esau and became Protestants, fulfilling Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. But it's very important, and most of the Messianics, they don't even know what this means. It's critical not to get stuck in Protestantism, because you have to come all the way back home in order to fulfill the Tanach. And then, as we saw from around 5756 to 5760, there was a time in between the two intifadas where you had the end of the curses over Ephraim in Ezekiel chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. These are the curses over Ephraim's captivity, basically for obeying Jeroboam's Talmud instead of the written Torah and Elohim's voice. So we just got out of that. And quite frankly, it's, Ephraim is still disorganized. So Judah came back to the land in stages. Ephraim's coming back to his identity in stages. We'll give you the full breakdown in the Abraham Accords series. Long story short, we have about 2 or 3 more generations and 2 more big wars, and then Ephraim will come home, provided that Judah doesn't carry out the Berchat Haminim and kill us in the meantime. Because please consider, if the prime minister doesn't have time, maybe he can consider just this. If Judah carries out the death curse and kills, eliminates all of Joseph, how does he plan to fulfill Genesis chapter 35 and verse 11? Or is the plan to figure that out after the fratricide? because you've always hated Joseph for saving your lives. You've always hated Joseph for receiving the dream. So is that the reason? Is that what we're really talking about here? You don't want us to have our identity. You not only want to be the kingship, and the Levites want to be the kingship you've got figured out, and that's yours. But the Levites want to be the priesthood, but they don't want to obey Elohim. And they want to teach pedophilia and death to Joseph. And they expect to gaslight Joseph, and we're going to buy it. We thought maybe there was a chance the prime minister bound tefillin this last week. So maybe we understand why the prime minister is talking with the Rebbe Schneerson. What do you do if you're me? So maybe you could ask the prime minister what he would recommend. What do you do if you're me? And someone uses military grade technology on you, hijacks your machine. And, you were there in Israel for 21 months trying to find some way for the tribes to come home. And, then they go to burn you out of the Rova HaYehudi, right? And you find out 11 years later that everyone's been lying to your face. Relationships are built on trust, yes? So you find out 21 months later you find out 21 months and 11 years later that they've been saying, no, we don't know anything about Joseph. We don't know anything about Ephraim. No, must be full conversion to Orthodox Judaism, must be no can do. You must convert to the Tanach. If you're not going to make a full conversion, you can only study that part of the, what did I say, Tanach or Talmud. If I said the wrong thing, it's long hours. We can't study the Tanach, and we're only allowed to study little bitty tiny parts of the Talmud. And you've known who we are for at least 200 years since Rabbi Riflin's analysis or prophecy, if you want to call it that. How does lying to Joseph bring about the Genesis 35 and verse 11 alliance? We're going to have to pick up again next week in Parasha Vayigash. But in that Parasha, we're going to see Judah never really does apologize. He was never really sorry. Basically, Judah was just sorry he got caught. Or how does Judah explain the death curse in Wikipedia? Type in Birchat Haminim. It's right there, brothers. What's the death curse all about? How come we can't know who we are? How come we can't know the prophecies over us? How come we can't know that Israel took us for sons, full-fledged sons, just so precisely so things like this wouldn't occur? What is Mashiach ben Yosef, vintage 5776 and 5777, 10 Jubilee cycles after the Protestant Reformation? Also, we'll talk about the Jubilee cycles in other contexts and regarding the return of Ephraim, wars. Talk about that Abraham Accord series. What did we do to you, brother Judah? What did Joseph ever do to you that you seek to repay us like this? Please pray for the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, that he might take action to stop the rabbis from leading his nation off the cliff, for leading his nation down the Judah and Tamar cycle path. That he might stop his nation from going down the Judah on Joseph violence path. We ask also for your prayers for the mighty men of the Knesset, that they might lead people back to Elohim's words in the Tanach, to get rid of the daily death curse over John Hagee and all of his people and all the Christian Zion, all the people that want to help you come home. And granted, their reasons for doing so down. Well, we'll talk about level 3 and below later. As always, please pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the eternal capital of all 12 or all 13 tribes, however you prefer. And please pray earnestly for the success of the Genesis 35 alliance. And our prayers are with the house of Judah. We just need you, please, to go back to the Tanach. Shabbat Shalom.